the PND Committee of the Whole minutes, and then just make that, make that amendment within the motion. I think she had the motion prepared, so I'll speak to her about, but basically we could just pull the motion and reread the corrected motion, just noting that it was an error. Because I think it's just the one date, everything else is the same, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Andrea, if you're listening, if we can get that corrected motion available for that part, that would be amazing.
Thumbs up. Stacy, where did you go? Give me a thumbs up when I'm ready to go.
You're good to go.
Good to go. Okay, call to order. Welcome, members of council, staff, and those who may be joining us on this electronic meeting of council on Wednesday, February the 10th. I will start by reading our welcome and council commitment. We are grateful for the many gifts which have been bestowed on Penetanguishene and its citizens, including the gifts of freedom, opportunity, and peace that we enjoy. May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. We ask that all in attendance and those who could not be here as to assist us in promoting good government. May our decisions as members of council be enlightened, and may we all be strengthened in our awareness of our duties and responsibilities. May we be granted the wisdom, the knowledge, will, and understanding to preserve the good fortune of the town for the benefit of all, and to make good laws and wise decisions. Thank you. And with that, we will move on to approval of the agenda and the regular council of agenda February 10, 2021, that the agenda of the regular council meeting of February 10, 2021 be approved as presented. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor LaRose and Councillor Mayat, all in favor? Thank you. Declaration of pecuniary interest, we have none. Proclamations, we have one, and that is the Black History Month. So whereas the town of Penetanguishene and Simcoe County's population is becoming increasingly diverse, making change encourages our community to recognize Black History Month as an opportunity to embrace diversity and to foster belonging and inclusion. And whereas Black History Month is a time to learn about the stories and many important contributions of local Black Canadians to the settlement, growth, and development of Simcoe County, and about diversity of Black communities in Canada and their importance to the history of this country. And whereas during Black History Month, Canadians celebrate the many achievements and contributions of Black Canadians who have and continue to do so much to make Canada the culturally diverse nation it is today. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Leroux, on behalf of the town of Penetanguishene Council, declare the month of February 2021 as Black History Month. And then we move on to 7, public meeting. And with that, I have that there are public meetings tonight under Section 34 of the Planning Act to consider 2 applications for zoning bylaw amendments to the town zoning bylaw 2000-02. The first is for the property at 77 Fox Street, and the second is a removal of a holding symbol for the property at 255 Champlain Road. So to council, the purpose of this public meeting is to provide an opportunity for the public to make comments. The purpose of this public meeting is not to engage in debate or regarding the merits of the application, nor is it intended to be a question and answer session. To the public, this is your opportunity to speak, and we encourage you to do so. In accordance with the Planning Act, if a person does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make written submission before the bylaw is passed or on approval given, you will not be entitled to appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal, and you may not be added to a to a hearing on an appeal to the LPAT unless, in the opinion of the LPAT, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So we will start with 77 Fox Street, and I believe that we have Janet Foster to run us through the application for 7 Fox Street. So Janet, if you are with us.
Yes, hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So there is a slide presentation that I had asked to be put on the screen rather than looking at me.
Okay, that is good.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so good evening, Mayor Leroux, members of council and town staff. My name is Janet Foster. I am a registered professional planner, and I am making this public meeting presentation on behalf of Fox Park Development Corporation for application to rezone the lands located at 77 Fox Street to residential third density R3 exception to permit the development of 56 townhouse units. Next slide, please. The lands are located on the east side of Fox Street, south of Yeo Street, and north of Maguire Park. The lands are approximately 1.2 hectares in size with 105 meters of frontage on Fox Street. The lands are bordered by existing low-density residential development. The building situated to the immediate north of the property is 83 Fox Street, which has been designated for its architectural and historical value of interest. The lands are currently vegetated. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located within the urban built boundary of the town of Penetanguishene, and therefore within an area focused for population growth. In accordance with the official plan, the lands are designated neighborhood area, which permit all forms of residential development. Although the lands are vegetated, they do not form part of the natural heritage system and are not designated environmental protection in accordance with the official plan. The lands are currently dual zoned residential third density R3 and deferred development D. The R3 zoning permits multiple unit dwellings, such as townhouses. The D identifies that the zoning of the lands is subject to study to determine the appropriate zoning. Next slide, please. The proposed development concept for the lands is a residential multi-unit development geared to low-income seniors. The units are proposed to be a mix of affordable rental units, some proposed through life lease. To date, no government assistance has been provided, and the development is not proposed as a subsidized housing project. The development concept proposes 56 self-contained townhouse units. All buildings will be 1 story in height and designed as 1-bedroom units. All units will have separate front door access and rear yard amenity space. The townhouse complex will include a common community indoor and outdoor gathering space. Access is provided from Fox Street through a crescent driveway where 74 parking spaces, including accessible parking, will be provided. A garbage enclosure and mailbox facility will be centrally located. A stormwater management facility is proposed for quantity control of stormwater. The proposed development is subject to site plan control. Next slide. From the development concept, you will note that the site is accessed from Fox Street for vehicle access on a crescent road that includes pedestrian access via internal sidewalks. There are 7 buildings that will house 56 townhouse units. Building 3 includes a community center with an outdoor gathering space. The stormwater management facility is located at Fox Street due to the natural drainage patterns. The location of the buildings are proposed with generous building setbacks to adjacent residential uses. Tree preservation and landscaping will provide additional green buffering. Next slide. To support the proposed rezoning application, technical reports were submitted that include a planning justification report, a scoped natural heritage evaluation, a functional servicing report, and a traffic analysis. From the planning justification report, the proposed rezoning is consistent with planning policies for complete, compact, and efficient development. It provides a housing type in an urban location designated for residential development. It allows logical and appropriate development of underutilized lands and provides affordable housing for seniors. The development concept is compatible with adjacent residential uses, and it provides a sensitive, low-impact built form with generous building setbacks adjacent to the designated dwelling at 83 Fox Street, maintaining its prominence and historical architecture on the streetscape. And the development contributes towards public transit ridership. The scope natural heritage evaluation identified that no negative long-term impacts to the local natural environment will occur. The natural heritage evaluation is currently being reviewed by the town's peer review. The lands are subject to site plan control and preservation plans. The functional servicing report identified that the lands can be serviced by existing municipal services and the stormwater will be efficiently managed. The traffic analysis identified that the driveway access to Fox Street is satisfactory. No additional infrastructure improvements are required, and the parking supply is sufficient and appropriate for the intended use. Next slide, please. The proposed rezoning or zoning bylaw amendment would rezone the lands from residential third density R3 and deferred development D to residential third density R3X with exception. The exception zoning provisions requested would permit a vehicle parking ratio of 1.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit, whereas the zoning bylaw requires 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, and would permit a minimum lot area of 218 square meters per dwelling unit, whereas the zoning bylaw requires 230 per dwelling unit. Next slide, please. The variance to vehicle parking ratio. In accordance with the town's zoning bylaw, 84 parking spaces are required for 56 units at a rate of 1.5 spaces per unit. The development concept is proposing 74 parking spaces, which is a rate of 1.32 parking spaces per unit. The town is currently working on a new zoning bylaw. The new zoning bylaw is recommending 1.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit for this form of housing type. Therefore, the proposed zoning variance is in keeping with the direction of the town's new bylaw for reduced parking in urban areas. A reduction in parking would reduce land consumption for parking needs and reduce impervious surfaces. The development contributes to public transit ridership. Because the development is geared to low-income seniors, not all seniors will have vehicles, and visitor parking will be available on site. Next slide. The variance to lot area requirements. The development is proposing a decrease in the required lot area per dwelling unit of 218 square meters per unit. At 56 units, this would require a lot area of 1.22 hectares. The zoning bylaw requires 230 square meters per unit, and at 56 units, this would require a lot area of 1.29 hectares. Decreasing the lot area requirements will facilitate more affordable housing units. The lands are designated and suitable for infill and intensification. Official plan policies identify the consideration of alternative residential development standards for the provision of affordable and attainable housing. A portion of the lands are already zoned R3. A reduction in lot area would increase the number of affordable units without impacting the residents' enjoyment for amenity area. The variance is considered minor as overcrowding is not anticipated. Next slide, please. In conclusion, the subject lands are located within an urban residential setting. The lands are designated neighborhood area, which are suitable for residential development. The lands do not form part of the natural heritage system, or are they designated or zoned environmental protection. The development concept is proposing 56 additional units, contributing to the town's affordable housing targeted for senior living. The proposed rezoning from R3 and D to R3X, or with exception, is in keeping with surrounding residential land uses and is an extension of the R3 zoning currently afforded to a portion of the subject lands. The requested rezoning variances to permit a reduction in parking and lot area per dwelling unit are considered minor. The scale, height, and housing form is compatible and sensitive to surrounding residential uses and provides a low impact form of development. The development concept provides generous building setbacks from existing residential uses and will be enhanced through landscaping measures. The lands will contribute to transit ridership and can be serviced through existing municipal infrastructure. The proposed rezoning, with exception to zoning standards, represents good land use planning. Thank you for the opportunity to present the proposed rezoning and the development concept for the subject lands. I would like to conclude my presentation with a fly-through imagery of what the proposed development might look like in its built form. Also to be noted is that the applicant is proposing measures to reduce greenhouse gas through the installation of rooftop solar panels. The video starts at the south entrance to the site at Fox Street and the location of the stormwater management facility. I thank you for your time and consideration of the proposed rezoning for the subject lands. If you could start the video for me, thank you.
No.
Oh, maybe that's not working.
Sorry, I just have to switch screens 1 moment.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No.
I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Janet. Actually, great presentation. Now I ask if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to make comments in opposition or in support of the application based on land use planning issues relevant to the application. I would ask that they please state their name and address for the record, if there is anyone. Do we have anyone from the public who wish to make any comment? No. Janet, do you have any concluding remarks or?
No, I think I've made my presentation, and I hope the fly-through gave you a little bit of an understanding of what the built form may look like. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, members of council, do we have any questions from council on the information presented? Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Janet, just a question for you. We always talk about affordable housing, and those definitions range like hugely. We're looking more at attainable housing. This project looks like it's more the affordable rather than the attainable. How would you present that?
Well, a percentage of the housing is proposed to be affordable in accordance with the official plan policies. There is a mix, obviously, that some of them will be life lease. So if that is a form of attainable housing, it does provide for senior living to have a different form of housing that is provided within the community other than just rental or purchase. It does provide another form of development. It's a new concept, it's life lease. And it does allow people to put down a certain percentage of money and then a monthly payment that would deal with ongoing expenses. So it is almost a form of rental housing, but it's based on a sort of a scale that moves forward as to how much money you're putting down and how much money then you're paying per rent or for rent monthly. So there is a certain percentage that is proposed for affordable. There is a certain amount that will be life lease. And again, it's not geared to subsidy, but it is another form of housing that could be attainable for seniors.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Levy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Question to Janet. We've often seen not similar developments because there isn't anything quite like this, but we've seen townhouse developments where the developer's not necessarily from here and doesn't take our vast amount of snow in the winter into consideration. And when I looked at the video, the first thing I was looking for was where are they going to put the snow? And especially with the parking right in front of the units and the relatively narrow roadway. So do you have a comment on how snow removal and storage would be handled?
Yes, actually, I will say that the applicant is actually from the area. They do live in either Wasaga Beach or Collingwood. It's somewhere in that order. So they are familiar with snow removal. There are areas for piling of snow. There are, if you look from the east portion of the property, there is a very generous landscape area. And there is also landscaping areas, obviously in the wintertime, that snow could be piled onto. So that has been taken into consideration, and it will be something that will be shown on site plans to actually identify where snow will be piled. If that becomes an issue, the other alternative is to remove snow from the property, to actually lift it and take it elsewhere. But I don't think that that's something that needs to happen because there are areas where snow can be piled in the landscaped areas during the winter months.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. This question to Janet. Janet, will this be a phased project or is there intent to come in and get it built out?
Yes, thank you. Actually, very good question. Originally, the applicant was looking to come in and develop the first phase, which is already zoned R3. And in doing the master plan, we identified that all of the requirements of the zoning bylaw could be satisfied on the south portion of the site that is already zoned R3. So the intent was going to be that the first phase could come forward. There could be a road with the first two buildings on the south side being developed, and then dealing with the rezoning application. And if it was approved, then phase 2 would happen. But what we did in conversations with town staff is we developed a master plan that dealt with the entire development. And if zoning happened concurrent with the site plan, that it's possible to have the entire development built at the same time. But if that didn't catch up, if the zoning didn't catch up with the site plan and the already existing zoning, then phase 1 could have gone forward without the balance of the property.
Thank you. I have one other question, if I may,
Yeah.
Your Worship.
Yeah.
Janet, is there access from McGuire, which is behind the development, or is there access solely from Fox Street?
At this point, we have proposed that access is only through the sidewalk to Fox Street and then to walk down over to McGuire Park. There isn't an access that is proposed at this time straight through to McGuire Park.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Wedevalker.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the video there, Janet. That answered one of my questions having to do with parking. But one of the things that did strike me in the video was the amount of asphalt in front of the units. There's not a lot of green space other than in between the blocks of units. And that is a little concerning to me. I'm not sure what or how much flexibility there is with the design, but from my perspective, I'd like to see a little bit more greenery between some of the parking spaces just to break up some of that parking, kind of across the frontage of all the units. Just a comment with respect to that particular aspect of the proposal.
Yes, I appreciate your comment, and through the site plan, we can certainly look at that issue.
Okay, further questions, members of council? There being none, thank you, Janet.
Sorry, Your Worship. Sorry, Your Worship. Just we did have a comment in the chat that I wanted to read just to ensure that we could answer this question. It was from Stephen de Russet, and it says, like the lease, like the Village at Bay Moorings development further down Fox Street, right? So they're comparing it to the Bay Moorings development, looking for clarification. A life lease. So the Bay Moorings development further down on Fox Street is a life lease as well. And they were just, I think, looking for clarification that it's similar to that development. I don't know if anyone can answer that question, but it is in the chat.
Well, that would be either Janet or Andrea to answer if they can.
And I apologize, I cannot answer that question.
So thank you very much, Your Worship. So I'll do my best, but I do believe that it's very similar to that model. I don't have the ins and outs of details, but I do recall that it is a life lease community at the Village at Bay Moorings. And so it is similar, I believe, in the model.
Good. Thank you, Andrea. Stacy, do we have anyone else that has requested?
Yes, we do. I have a note here from Ann Keeley, and I'm just going to read it. It says, "Why don't you give this lot and all other forest lots to the people of Penetanguishene? There wouldn't be a loss of habitat for the animals and birds and bats, and a loss of vegetation or traffic report or anything. And the people who walk in the forest or ride their bikes or snowshoe or cross-country ski or just walk in the sun shining on their backs would appreciate it. I know I would."
Andrea, what do we say to that one?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. We appreciate that comment from the public. It is similar to ones we heard in Innisfield. Excuse me, I'm just going to jump back. There was some comments that were received as part of in prior to the public meeting tonight. That's part of your staff report and package too. So there was public comments in that package. But some of these comments we will be following up with in a future staff report and addressing some of these comments and questions that have come in from the public to fully to council and to them as well. So we appreciate those comments from Anne, and we'll be following up.
Okay. Madam Clerk, do we have any further?
Nothing
Emails
further, Your Worship, that I see.
Councillor Vadeboncoeur, you have your card up.
Thank you, Worship. I think the term is land lease. I know you use the term life lease. I've heard that used more in the States than in Canada, but if we're talking about similar developments, I think the term is land, a land lease development.
I don't know.
So noted, Councillor Vadeboncoeur. I appreciate that clarification. I think you're correct, and there is a difference there.
Yeah. Okay, we have nothing further then. Thank you, Janet, for your presentation. Well done.
You're very welcome.
So with that, we will move on to our second request for rezoning, and that is
Sorry, Your
for...
Worship. Sorry, before you get started, we do have a motion as part of that item for 77 Fox Street.
Okay, and what is the motion, Madam Clerk?
All right, so that this report be received for discussion and that staff be directed to prepare a report for a future committee of the whole meeting. Any comments received at the public meeting?
I see you're cutting in and out.
Oh, I'm not sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the motion for the public meeting for 77 Fox Street, that this report be received for discussion and that staff be directed to prepare a report for future committee of the whole meeting to address any comments received at the public meeting.
Okay, mover and a second. Councillor Levy and Councillor Saint-Amand, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. So that with that, we will move on to 255 Champlain Road. And that one, I would ask Andrea if she would present that one.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship, members of council. This is a slightly different type of zoning amendment application. It is the removal of a holding symbol from the property at 255 Champlain Road. The property has satisfied the chief building official in terms of meeting the Ontario Building Code for an appropriate and adequate septic system. And for those reasons, we're recommending removal of the holding H symbol. Notice was given and we've not received any comments from neighbors on the proposed removal of the H.
Thank you, Andrea. And with that, I have to ask anyone in the audience who wishes to oppose or support the application based on land use planning issues relevant to the application. And if so, please state your name and address for the record. And Madam Clerk, did we have any come in through email or?
I don't believe so, and there are no items in the chat that I'm aware of.
Okay, and with that, members of council, do you have any questions to our planner? There being none, then I would ask Madam Clerk if you would read the motion for that one, please.
Okay. This is for 255 Champlain Road. That a zoning bylaw amendment to remove the holding H symbol from the property municipally known as 255 Champlain Road be approved.
Mover and a seconder. Councillor LaRose and Deputy Mayor Dubo, all in favor. Thank you. So with that, we will move on to 8 as deputations and presentations, of which we have 2 this evening. And our first one is a presentation from the Georgian Bay General Hospital, and I believe we have Nicole Krafchick with us.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. And Gail Hunt is here with me tonight as well, the President and CEO of the hospital.
Yeah. Hello, Gail.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
And Christine
No problem.
Bagley is also here as well.
Yeah. Yep.
And Stacy,
Oh.
do you have the presentation? Or do you want me to pull it up?
We do have it available, but yes, I believe that the arrangement was that whoever's presenting would be the one to share it, and
I can do it.
And that way it just goes a little more smoothly that way.
Absolutely, I can do that. And especially if I'm doing it, not Gail, right? So just kidding.
It's noted, that's true.
I'm kidding. Okay, let me just pull this up. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for having us this evening. And we just wanted to take you through a little bit of an update from the hospital, of course, and the foundation. So between Gail and I, we will go back and forth. And of course, the first thing we wanted to say was thank you. You folks have been so generous over the last 20 plus years to the hospital, supporting us with almost $185,000 towards many different projects at the hospital. The Today I'm Working for My Hospital campaign, of course, annual equipment needs, emergency department renovation, and CT scanner as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you for the support, along with the most recent support that you've given us. This next slide, we just like to show, and we always put it in the information that we give you with the request as well. But you can see that about 18% of the emergency room visits, totaling about 8,000 for residents of Penetanguishene, are included in this graph. So definitely the usage for your residents is significant for the hospital, and we're happy to be able to be there for your residents. And Gail?
Yes, thank you. So just a little bit about the economic impact. So not only does GBGH provide access to acute healthcare services for Penetanguishene residents close to home, but we also have 113 of our staff members are also residents of Penetanguishene. So it's about 15% of our staff are actually residents, and that doesn't even include the physicians as well. So we are a major employer for residents in the community, and their work at GBGH enables them to rent or own homes, pay property taxes, and contribute to the local economy. Thank you. So community hospitals like GBGH deliver essential high quality services, acute care services close to home, and the things that we provide are must-have services, not really nice to have. And the reasons that we hospitals have, like ourselves, for financial challenge include we have consistent growth in volumes, the same, that you face as well as a municipality, but the funding is not proportional to the growth in the community. For example, we've done more than 5.2 million in unfunded inpatient bed volumes over the past 5 years. And then higher volumes don't unfortunately equate to more funding under the current funding formula. So we also have quality-based procedures, what you call, and things like strokes and COPD are counted as procedures that you're funded for, but you're only funded for a certain amount, no matter, and we usually exceed that here with our more senior population, and you don't receive any more funding for that. Things like that have led to a working capital deficit for the hospital of more than 14 million because of the unfunded work that we do and from year to year. And eventually the consequence of continued funding shortfalls, we have an inability to meet the demand for service, and we have to reduce services, which means less access for the community. And we have no money to invest in aging infrastructure or equipment and technology or information systems. So we've seen some great successes over the past 18 months, but we've certainly had some incredible challenges to endure and overcome. Hospitals have never been through anything like this pandemic before, and it's taken a real toll on our team. COVID exhaustion in healthcare is a reality. So during the early days, there was a lot of anxiety about the unknown and so many questions about with information changing on a daily or minute by minute basis. Within a matter of mere days, we had to change the way we do everything by physically splitting our hospital into dedicated hot and cold zones. We purchased additional equipment to be able to reduce the flow of equipment in between patient rooms. We stopped visitation, started it, stopped it again. We ceased non-urgent and elective procedures. We had to educate staff regarding infection control protocols for COVID, re-educate them when it changed, as these protocols have changed several times since introduced, and changing staffing models and redeploying staff where it's needed most. So we've had to not only change the way we do things, but also have to put staff in, orient them quickly and put them in new positions in the hospital. And we also had to figure out how we could meet potential testing models with our assessment center as it flexes, as these volumes jump up and down rapidly. And of course, at the end of the day, figure out how we're going to pay for this. So I'd be lying if I said that GBGH team isn't tired and experienced some burnout from this long pandemic, and many of the staff have been redeployed and others are working tirelessly to ensure that all the plans are in place for rapid changes in the situation. You'll see some of our staff have actually been redeployed to the assessment center and in other departments of the organization. So I'm sure anyone on the team would tell you this has been the toughest year to work in healthcare in their careers. And some projects have had to been delayed because we had to deploy people and devote resources to our other pandemic response and preparedness. So the support in our community in terms of messages of encouragement have been very important in lifting spirits. The support of donors has been instrumental in inspiring our teams. It really shows the teams the faith the community has in them during these challenging times. And the donor support is so important, so we continue with the much needed improvements in our equipment and hospital infrastructure into the future beyond COVID. And some of the great things we still managed to do in spite of all that was going on was in late 2019, we did begin offering shoulder repair surgeries as part of the hospital's expansion of surgical services, providing this care close to home. The procedures include repairing joints and muscles and tendons in and around the shoulder. And we were funded for 33 shoulder surgeries in the past year. And we know that nearly 100 patients actually travel outside our region to get these procedures done in the last year. So we're hopeful that we can advocate for increased funding to be able to do these procedures at home and reduce the travel. In early October, we began a new service with echocardiograms. An echocardiogram is an ultrasound of the heart, which produces images that cardiologists use to diagnose heart murmurs and valve functions, cardiac masses, hypertension, and heart disease. So we partnered with RVH to bring this important service to our community. And GBGH inpatients and outpatients are now able to have this cardiac diagnosis procedure in Midland, with saving the need to travel to Barrie or Orillia to get it done. And the service is right now provided 3 days a week in our imaging department by a sonographer from RVH. And those are reviewed by the RVH cardiologist, which makes sense because that's a connection of service where you would go to get specialized care. But the goal is, of course, to increase this to 5 days a week as we grow the service. And finally, this past fall, we received some important news about our ICU, our intensive care unit. We have recently been designated as a level 3 basic facility based on a review by Critical Care Services Ontario of the ICUs across the province. So there are 5 levels of the ICU care in Ontario, and this is the second highest designation an ICU can receive in Ontario, with the exception of course, specialty care units like coronary care. So we had to meet specific criteria to reach this level related to respiratory therapy support, ventilator use, and intravenous blood management, blood monitoring, and medication management. So it's an incredible accomplishment for a hospital of our size, and the team is really proud. So this designation also means we can provide some of the most complex and acutely ill patient care in our region, and also makes it more attractive when we're recruiting intensivists and nursing staff who prefer to work in a more specialized critical care setting. Nicole?
Yeah, thank you, Gail. So this slide really just gives you an overview of some of the important projects that we've been able to fund this year from your support, but as well from the generous donors, as Gail was mentioning. So we were able to get 2 new ultrasound units. You'll see a picture of one of them there. Telemetry packs, that's one of our staff holding that. We got 10 of those. We've got a microdebrider, which is part of ear, nose, and throat surgery. and 2 Untitled CO2 monitors have been purchased. And of course, we still have ongoing support for the electronic medical record project and the refreshing of the patient rooms. And of course, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned this because we have been really blessed with some great support this year, and thank you to your worship for helping us celebrate that. But I think it's really important for everyone to understand that although this was a large gift and a transformational gift, it is just the tip of the iceberg of the needs that we have at the hospital. I know that sounds like a lot, but really on an average year, we're about 7 million in unmet capital. And over the next 5 years, we're looking at 20 to 25 million. So still lots of work to do to ensure that our teams have the tools that they require and that they're ensuring that there's exceptional care for the patients that come through the doors. And this is just a small selection of some of those things. So the electronic medical record project is a huge piece of what we're doing right now. That's about a $7 million project just for our share alone. On the horizon, we're looking at the ICU central monitoring system, as well as defibrillators and crash carts, which you've probably heard from our Kickstart Your Heart campaign that we have going on right now. So again, lots of needs that are still up and coming and lots of work to do. One of the other things that we're really focusing on from a foundation perspective is that legacy giving. So encouraging others to have conversations with us about potentially leaving gifts in their estate. And it's just for us continuing that message of ensuring that once we purchase that land, that we are dedicated to ensuring that the growth of the hospital is there. And we want to make sure that we've got the strongest community healthcare system that we can have. And again, this is one of our, I would say, for me, one of the most wonderful things that we had this year that we really started was our Business Cares program. We really wanted to make sure that we were seeking to serve our business community, those that have supported us for such a long time. And so we wanted to make sure that at a time where maybe they didn't have marketing dollars to spend, that we could use our channels and drive people back to their business. And of course, this is just a selection of some of the wonderful Penetanguishene businesses that have been part of the support of the hospital. And we can't be more proud of everyone's stepping in and helping out in any way that they can. And of course, us helping them right back. And that's it. We can open it up to questions if anyone has questions.
Having fun with my computer tonight. I could say very good presentation, ladies, but I missed most of it. My computer froze and I was gone, and I just got back on. So do we have Nicole or Gail? Anyone? Councilor Vadimokar?
Thank you. Great presentation. You didn't really comment on the emergency department. I know it's the renovation has been in place for a little while now. I'm just wondering how is it working? I don't get up there very often, so I was just curious, is the space functional? Is it meeting the needs? I know it was a long time coming and it was nice to see it, but I haven't heard too much since it's been fully functional.
Thanks. I'm happy to answer that question. I'm very happy to hear that you don't need it and you haven't had the opportunity to visit very often. That's actually good to hear. The space is quite functional. I think it was an adjustment for staff to work in such a larger space initially because they were squished into a little area, and when you're close together, it's sometimes easier to do things. So it was a transition to move to a bigger space where they're actually spaced out. But I think that it's a blessing that it was done before COVID, because it definitely gave us the ability to move patients and space them appropriately, which we would have had a horrible time in the previous situation. So it really allowed us in the new space. We were able to divide it up by hot and cold zones to be able to separate patients if they were symptomatic. That part's been really good. Pre-COVID, we have such such great feedback from patients about the waiting area and the children's playroom that's in there, and how much more pleasant it's made the experience. So the staff, I think, and the patients both have really enjoyed the new space. And I think that unfortunately, one of the drawbacks from COVID, and I hope that you as counselors can help when you're approached by community members of this, is that, and it's happened across all of Ontario, is that we've seen a significant drop in patients coming to the emerge department because their fear about catching COVID at the hospital. This has led to patients coming in well after cardiac events or things like that, when more damage has been done that's irreversible. So we are encouraging people that transmission in the emergency department has never been an issue. We have high protocols in place because we don't know, we assume that everybody who walks in the emerge is positive. And I would, if you're approached, I would ask that you please encourage people, if they're concerned about something, please come to the emergency department, because we have seen, although we've seen less patients, we've seen a phenomenal increase in acuity level of the people that are coming in. So hope that answered your question, Councillor.
Thank you, it does.
Further questions from Gail or Nicole? Councillor Sainama.
Thank you, Your Worship. No questions per se. Just want to say what a fabulous presentation. It's always good to get updated as to how things are going and where things are at with the hospital. So it's near and dear to my heart, and so thanks so much for the update.
Good. Well, thank you, ladies. Very good presentation for what I saw of it, but I'm sure it was very well done. And thank you again. And you know, that we, the council, and the people of Penetanguishene certainly have GBGH in our hearts and minds. And we know and realize that the importance of funding for capital projects, because we know they're not forthcoming from the ministry. So we know we have to do our part, and we're just pleased that we are able to do so.
Thank you for having us this evening. Now, I wasn't sure, would you like us to take a quick shot so that we can do the news release for the gift, or did you want to arrange for something else at another time?
Mr. CAO, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, it can be done either way. I would suggest, really, Nicole and Gail, you guys probably have saw it done both ways. So my suggestion, Mr. Mayor, is to leave it in the hands of these capable ladies.
Absolutely, I have no problems with that at all.
Playing it safe, Jeff.
And the council don't either, so that's good. Okay, thanks. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And with that, then we will move on to our second presentation of the evening, and that is a year in review of the Southern Georgian Bay Detachment. And we have with us the Southern Georgian Bay Detachment Commander, Joe Evans. So Joe, if you're there. Sarah, do we have Joe?
There he is.
Wake up, Joe.
There he is.
There he is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, good.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Members of Council, thanks for having me here, and people in the gallery. I look forward to bringing you through the last year, 2020. It's been quite the year for everyone as we sit here over our virtual means. So I'm going to start. Stacy, do you have this that you can put it up for me?
Sarah might have it available. If you are able to share your screen, that would be fabulous. But if not, Sarah could probably share her screen.
Yes, I don't have it on video. So
okay, we'll just give Sarah a moment to see if she can pull it up, and we'll get started.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Is everybody able to see that?
Yes, we got it.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. That is excellent. Thank you very much. So we will get started with Southern Georgian Bay, and we'll turn to the next slide, I guess, if you will, or the next page. So what's new? Well, the detachment commander position is still up in the air. Andrew Ferguson, who owns the seat of Southern Georgian Bay, is still acting superintendent and remains in the CFO, Chief Firearms Office, as a bureau commander in Aurelia. So he is there, which means that Joe Evans got extended in this seat as well, which I'm enjoying the development, and I'll remain here until the 16th of May is the next renewal date. So we'll see what happens until that time. Moving to the second bullet, staffing development at Southern Georgian Bay. We've got people out due to the shortage across the OPP, and it's province-wide, with the shortages that we were suffering and the budget restraints that we were dealing with. Came to a head quite a bit last year, which forced us to put people from here and other places to give development is what is happening, but it's to fill the necessary holes that are across the province. So I've got people out of the detachment here in general headquarters, and I also have, because they're leaving to work on projects and stuff that are going on across the province, I have people from the detachment that have moved up into their positions of leadership. And the problem with that is there's nobody filling up the bottom. And so we are running short of the normal, but we are running at an operational readiness that can support our policing calls for service. So that should make you feel a little better there. And it is a good, you know what, we have to develop our people. So this has caused us to develop them a little more than we would like. However, things are going to start transitioning back now as these other positions are being filled. And that's why I am here. I'm filling a position because Andrew's filling a position in CFO. So moving on to the next bullet. What 3 words? It's a mobile app, a new mobile app that people need to download to their phone. It's free. It's worked for us. We had 3 snowmobilers in Aurelia that were lost, and this is how we found them. So what it does is there's 3 meter squares, and it covers the province of Ontario. And the person that designed this, obviously very bright and technical savvy. And what he did was he made the whole province of Ontario full of grid squares. And each square has 3 words. So if you're lost, all you have to do is call the OPP, tell them that you've got the app and what 3 words are the location you're standing in. And we can, at that point, then get out our emergency personnel with their GPS and shoot a bearing right onto your location and come and get you. It's worked really, really well. Originally we were told that the provincial the provincial communication center could send this out to someone's phone if they were in distress and lost or felt that they were lost. And I found out this afternoon, we confirmed that they cannot do that. So you have to have it downloaded to your phone. So anybody that's listening, I would suggest strongly that you drop this app down into your phone and you play with it a little bit, and you'll find that it's not very difficult to use at all. So we've used it in the OPP. It's been successful, and I suggest that other people do it and pass it on to your friends, because it makes our job a lot easier to someone trying to give us a position specifically out in the water, let's say in the Penetanguishene area or the Midland area, where you're out in the water and you have no idea of what you're looking at. So with this What 3 Words app, can tell us exactly in the water where you are, and we can send a vessel to come and save you, or snowmobile now that the ice is starting to come in. The COVID pandemic, it's not really new. It's there's some new areas of it that we're dealing with right now. Everybody should know that Simcoe Muskoka Public Health Unit is still on lockdown. It's only out in the East End that they've lifted to some extent. And our education, our warning, and our enforcement is of the legislation is still going forward, working with our partners the best we can, our bylaw people throughout Southern Georgian Bay. And then, of course, if I move to challenges, that's one of my top challenges is the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that the kids are back in school, calls for service has gone up. Kids are out in the smoke areas, or they're talking, their masks are down, people are calling it in left and right. So the easiest thing to do there is I have officers attend and do foot patrol in the morning and the afternoon when school, prior to and after school. So we still build that camaraderie with the kids, but we can actually educate them a little bit more with using their proper protective equipment and keeping their masks up, and just so that we make sure that we try to keep this virus as low as we can here in the area. Staffing pressures rather, sorry. I did speak to it off the get-go, and it totals 11 temporary assignments that I have at a detachment now of 102 people. So it does start to add up. Now, in saying that, out of those temporary assignments, they're being pulled from different areas within the detachment: crime, traffic, and frontline. So not everybody is, and administration. So not everybody is, it's not everybody coming off the front line. So we're missing police officers on the front line. That's why we're able to do what we're doing. And further to those staffing pressures is, of course, still the budget that we were dealt with for our policing costs. And from the time I've got here to Southern Georgian Bay, which is coming up on 15 months, I believe, I've noticed that the fleet here is very tired. Our cruisers are getting high miles on them. They move every day. They're more frequenting. They're frequenting the repair often. It's not like your own car with 200,000 on it. There's several different drivers that are driving these vehicles, and they're not driven lightly. So they are emergency vehicles. We do expect them to break down, but we've had quite a few accidents over the last year as well. And not all the officers' fault. We have people that hit us as well. So, but at the same time, we need to look at getting this fleet fixed up a little bit for the safety of our officers, as well as the people in the community. So I have been talking to our fleet rep, and he says new vehicles should be coming. They bought quite a few now with the new budget coming into the OPP. So that is hopefully corrects itself going into the near future. Moving on to our crime stats. You'll notice for 2020, this is strictly for Penetanguishene, we had 38 break-and enters. Before I really get into this stuff, I want you to know that all these numbers that we're reviewing here, they're all fluid. So depending on like even 2019, 2018, we still have calls open from 2018, 2019, depending on the severity of the criminal offense, that they're still waiting on different areas of the investigation to close. So these numbers can still change for into the future. And if I was to run this, if I was to get Nicole to run this again tomorrow, the numbers would be different again yet. So these are as accurate as I can get you for this time frame. So the break and enters again, 2020, we're up 2 over 2019. And this is kind of an anomaly because every other area in Southern Georgian Bay are down. So I had these numbers checked again because I thought there might have been an error, but theft of motor vehicles, 9. Theft from motor vehicles, 31. Now, again, this is, you got to take into effect where we've been for the last year, almost next month, it'll be a year that we've been dealing with COVID. We've been dealing with lockdowns. We've been dealing with many things. Some people out of work, but the people that have cars need to start locking them. It would make our job and their lives a lot easier if they secure their vehicles. It would reduce that number exponentially. Assaults. These assaults include Waypoint and Penetanguishene. So they're total 94, which is, again, speaks directly to the COVID piece. You can see that the trend across, especially during the lockdowns, our calls for domestic violence are higher. And it's, people are getting locked in the house together and they're not allowed to move. They're hurting financially, and we understand that. But police are bound by laying charges. So we have to, when it comes to domestic, we have to hold somebody accountable in that area. So just for the safety of the victim. So 94 assaults there, over 41 the year prior. Mischiefs, 49 from 54. It's not a big change. Alarms are down. 911s are down in a drastic number because of the pocket dial, the new phones. We brought in that new technology in the communication center so that we should confirm if we can't touch base with them. A lot of the breakdown happens at the communication center so that officers aren't deployed. So you can imagine that every 911 call is a 2-officer call. So you can look at the reduction in calls for service there. Moving on to impaired care and control, down to 7, which is good news. Or is that just the ones we caught? And I know there's more going on out there. And so total calls for service, 3,431 over 2,446 in 2019. That includes all calls. Those aren't all billable. So we move over to the next page, clearing rates for Penetang. Again, these are not hard, fast numbers. They're averages that will move slightly one way or the other. But you'll see the clearance rates are 69.1% for 2020. Violent crimes, property crime is down 15.9. That's where you see your motor vehicles and your thefts being eased, and then your drug crime was down to 85.7 from 100 last year. Still investigations going on in those areas. Moving to the next page for Southern Georgia Bay as a detachment, you can see the difference in the numbers from Penetanguishene to Southern Georgia Bay. I think you're actually a little higher in the violent crime clearance, lower in the property, and higher in the drugs for clearance. So that's the detachment as a whole, the other 4 areas. Moving into Penetanguishene for motor vehicle accidents, thankfully we didn't have any fatalities in Penetang this year. 7 personal injury accidents and 50 property damage accidents as a total. If we move over to the detachment as a whole for motor vehicle accidents, you'll see that sadly we had 7 fatalities last year in 2020, 78 personal injury accidents, and 487 property damage accidents that we responded to. For the year in review for violations, arrests, and hours, just go through this and you'll see the difference in the charges. And again, I speak to officers becoming accustomed to working in a global pandemic. I can remember off the start when officers, we had platoon meetings with each platoon and with the team leads and telling them, okay, business as usual. Let's go out there. Let's stop vehicles. We have to make sure that there's law and order. And I was getting questions back. you don't expect us to do the same job. Like we don't stop cars and that now. What if someone has COVID, you know? So we had to go through, and it was crawl, walk, run. People, you know, this is when we're earning our money. We have to go out there and make sure we're doing things. And if you see now compared to then, a year later, it's become a normal way of life here in the detachment. When you see everybody walking around with PPE and exercising their PPE when they're loading up at the start of their shift, they're wiping everything down. So it's become a way of life here in the detachment. No one's allowed in the detachment unless you work here. I've locked it down that way so that we don't get our people sick. I can't afford to have officers off. So this is where you'll see the difference in the charges here. 2019, 110 seatbelt fines to 2020, 25 seatbelt fines. Speeding, yeah, speeding we did well. You can get all your information off the plate, but the officers and members worked hard to reduce the speeding. That's excellent. Distracted driving. I can tell you that every time I'm off duty and I'm in my truck, that I can look down on the vehicles and I see people texting all the time on their phones, and it just drives me crazy because that's the #1 killer in Canada, right there. Used to be impaired operation, now it's distracted driving. So we need to really put an end to this, and we have to, police have to play within the rules all the time. So what we do is we have to find a better way of identifying somebody on the phone and holding them accountable for that charge. Impaireds are down to 103 from 190, still not satisfactory in my mind. They have to come down quite a bit more, and we're working on that. We're doing a lot of rides, both snowmobile, cars, anything we could do, and I'll go over the numbers later with vessels. This past summer, we really started making a difference there. So that's the total of the big four. 35, 30 at the end of 220. We're up slightly in tickets, but I think we can still do better, or we need to do better in a lot of those areas for the safety of our communities, because that is our mission as police officers. Moving into others, other HTA, other Highway Traffic Act, we had just over 1,000 tickets there. Other CC Criminal Code, 1,200 tickets there. And then your drugs and insurance, we had another just short of 1,000 tickets there. So moving down into our arrests, we had 1,261 arrests, and that's detachment wide. ADLS suspensions, we had, well, if it's ADLS suspensions, it would be 103 ADLS suspensions, but that should say other warnings and suspensions. It should be 46 there versus 26 in 2019. And a lot of that came from our Marine officers during the summer. You'll see our traffic stops is 6,900. Patrol hours, 22,000. And you can see, so there's a lot more patrol hours, and then from the patrol hours, you see the speeding tickets up. So that's their direct correlation there. And then court hours, although there hasn't been court doors aren't open, we're still doing court over virtual means. So we're down a little bit from 1,900, but we're at 1,700, and now it's starting to pick up even more now with all the bails and all the criminal proceedings that they have going, where we've got officers in every day. Now we have a special office with the computer set up so that they can do court every day from the detachment. Auxiliary program. So when this all started with COVID, I shut the auxiliary down for this location. Just because I wanted to curtail the amount of people that were coming in and out. So I put strict rules in so that this was a clean, safe place. The only people that could come in was police officers and anybody that we arrested or charged. So the auxiliaries, although a very great asset to the community, we miss them dearly. it was for safety purposes that I stopped them from coming in. This speaks directly to other areas of the community that I've already mentioned. One of them being important, lock it and lose it. It's the auxiliary folks that come in and they walk many of the parking lots around our areas, Penetang, Midland, all the areas that we have people that are parking and shopping and not thinking twice about just shutting their door. And we exercise the piece about going around and confirming the security of your vehicle. When we discussed this, we had to make a decision if we were going to carry on with that or not. Even though they were using PPE, our officers or our auxiliaries, would people from the community be upset that other people were touching their car and the scare of the virus and everything else? We shut it down completely. So that is on me. They've been asking to come back. But now it's being shut down for the lockdown, and then we'll see what happens as we start to go through the ROA, the reopening of Ontario Act after the 16th of February, all being well. But they are a great asset, and we miss them dearly. Next, please. Oh, sorry, I think we got, yeah, you're gonna have to go another one. There we go. So we're on to a Marine. So the 2020 Marine, I happen to, I've only lived in the area for 3 years. So my wife and I bought a boat in 2019. So I happened to be out in Georgian Bay last year, and I wasn't impressed at all with the video I was watching, the live video I was watching as I was driving around in my watercraft. So the first thing I did after someone cheers me with a tall boy beer was I called in another vessel to be on the water on the weekends so that we can reduce the potential of having a bad accident out there and possibly losing somebody. So I authorized overtime, which totaled 320 hours of overtime for the summer, to have a second vessel on the water. We did 2,430 hours of Marine patrol. We attended 361 calls for service. We did 2,244 vessel checks. Out of that, there was 307 offense notices that were issued, 10 impaired charges. So that would be part of that 103 that you saw, and 29 3-day suspensions. So people lost their vehicle and or their license, well, both, for 3-day suspension. So we have 1,200 square kilometers of water out there. I've spoken to some of you regarding speeding and otherwise, and I've put checks and balances in place to make sure that we're doing as much as we can in all the hot spots where the complaints are, so that we can work with the community to target and improve the visibility of the police, so that people know that around any corner you might be running into one of us. So it seems to be, it seemed to work last year in the water, and I've got that plan as well as extra for this year at Big Shoot and at the lots. So that's coming through. Just to reduce the alcohol, #1 complaint all summer long. Can we go on to motorized snow vehicle, please? Thank you. Last year was a horrible year for snow and for the use of our snowmobiles. I think all year long, I think there was only, I think they got those 7 times for 7 patrols. And out of those patrols, we did life-saving measures out in the bay, and there were 7 offense notices written. This year, we've been on the snow since the 27th of December, 2 snowmobiles every day. We're writing 7 to 11 offense notices a day. I don't have my rides available, but compared to what we did last year, people here, the members of Southern Georgian Bay, have said they've never seen us out this much in the on the sleds. Now, to do that, we have to take from the vehicles, so there's still the same amount of officers working. So now we have snowmobiles that are attending calls for service as well when they're close to the calls for service. So they do monitor the means, and they can answer radio calls, as well as they're doing lots of ride and roaming patrol. We also have vehicles or cars that are actually sitting on trailheads doing speed enforcement and rides as well. So officers that aren't even qualified in snowmobiles are doing speed control and just writing tickets under the Motorized Snow Vehicle Act. So we've got it's been a detachment, collective detachment approach to trying to save people, and sadly we've already lost 3 sledders in the waters of Southern Georgian Bay this year. So it's been a horrible start, and we've tried to up the game a little bit more to be even more proactive and visible with our goals and objectives, so that you know, we can keep people safe with their families as much as possible. And just to close off where we're heading, the 2020-2022 Detachment Action Plan has been written and approved. It got approved middle of January, and that talks to you know, the promise we have to protect Ontario, to keep our communities safe, which I'm huge about when it comes to disability and preventing, you know, victims of crime, and holding those people accountable that do create that I just lost my place here for a minute. The criminals, of course, that create all this, we hold them accountable, and then we try to find and increase the safety of those that were victimized. We are working on our community safety and well-being plan. That has been moving along, and I'm working with Stacy on that. We're part of the same team, and I believe that as far as I know, that is supposed to be met by the first, January. It was supposed to be done for January 2021. It's going to be done for July. So I'm going to close by saying we in Southern Georgian Bay can continue to support the communities and create a safe atmosphere around here, specifically Penetang, for us to live, work, and play. So, barring any questions, I thank you very much for the time, and I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Stacy, okay, there we go. Very good report, Joe. Very extensive, very informative. Well done. Members of council, do we have any questions of Joe at all? Councillor Klug.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you so much for that presentation. I found that very, very informative. I'm wondering if in the action plan coming up for the next two years or 1 year, however that shakes out, is there anything in there about anti-bias, anti-racism training for the detachment?
Through you, Mr. Worship, thank you. You know what, good question, Councillor. It doesn't go specifically into that. There is a lot of training. We touch on many areas of training, and specifically to that, and it's becoming more prevalent all the time that we are dealing with things like that. So the officers we have a system in all the computers on the internet where we go on to OPP Learn, and every year they have the different things, and racism and all that is those are the normal pieces that we actually have to go in and do the checks and balances to make sure that we're on par with what is going on. You know what, we don't have any room for that anymore in the workplace, in the communities. We don't have it. Everybody is equal opportunity, and we support everybody and work with everybody the same. So I haven't dealt with any of that, but I haven't specifically seen any courses on it either. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Wedebaker, did I see your card up? Yes.
Thank you, Worship. Likewise, Inspector, very good presentation. My question has to do with your comments with respect to staffing resources. I know that when the town of Midland went with the OPP, their contract guarantees them a certain complement with respect to enforcing police enforcement within the town of Midland. And I'm just wondering, how does that impact the rest of the detachment when you have resource issues such as you've described in your presentation? How do you balance between what Midland has in their contract versus the policing requirements for the remainder of the detachment?
Through you, Mr. Worship, thank you. Good question, Councillor. You're sharp, but you weren't listening all the way through, because I said that we meet our operational readiness, which would be the minimum numbers for every zone that we have, which would be your 8 officers. So that covers everything. And then we can still, even though there's 4 officers and a sergeant for downtown, we can still pull from there to back up as calls need. So we'll move those numbers around, but 8 is the absolute minimum, and I wouldn't go anywhere below that, just for that specific reason. Not even thinking of what was promised to Midland, but the rest of the areas are just as important as what Midland is. So we have to move as calls come in and require a certain level of police presence. We'll pull from one zone to the other and then support back. But when we do log on for each shift, we have all the numbers that we absolutely require to police this area to the fullest extent of the law.
Thank you, Inspector. I did hear that comment. I just wanted to have it explained. So thank you very much for doing that.
Absolutely, sir.
Further questions? Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good presentation, Joe. I guess we don't have to meet in March. Perhaps you can explain the call for service closest to the call respond. So that would mean Huronia West or different detachments responding to our calls.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Worship. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, it'll be something similar, but the numbers might be a little different in March when I speak to you. Closest call for service started, well, they tried to start it for the last 5 or 6 years, but now they're getting that if there's a car on the border, because now every car has a computer in it, what happens is you're on GPS. So the dispatcher can say, even though you're a Southern Georgia Bay unit and you're down by Springwater, that we have a priority 0 call or a priority 1 call that's ongoing. Instead of having a car scream across from Huronia West, they'll have a car that's maybe 3 kilometers away from the wrong detachment, or from a neighboring detachment instead of the wrong detachment. From the neighboring detachment, we'll go and attend that priority call until such times as the other cars from the proper detachment get there. So it just makes it for a safer passageway. And because the last thing we want to do is have a member of the public or a member of the OPP injured trying to get to a call when there was a car that was 2 kilometers away. And that's how the closest to the call piece works.
Okay, anyone else have questions for Joe? No, there being none, then again, Joe, thank you very much. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
With that, members of council, we will move on with our agenda and go to item 9, which is the adoption of minutes not already confirmed. That the following minutes of council meetings be confirmed and adopted as circulated. Council, January 13, 2021. Special Council, January 12, 2021. And Special Council, January 20, 2021. A mover and a seconder. Councillor LaRose, Councillor Mayette, all in favor? That's good. That Carried. Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda, we have none. Matters for consideration. The first item is the Penetanguishene Memorial Community Center reopening, RCS 2021-03, that the ice of the Penetanguishene Memorial Community Center be removed for the remainder of the 2021 ice season. And so before I go to mover and a seconder, we'll have any questions or debate. And maybe what I might do is ask our Director of Recreation and Culture to just give us a bit of a rundown on this.
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. So as Council will recall, we brought forward a report back in October to seek direction on reopening the facility with anticipating additional costs to do so.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, we just wanted to make sure we're following proper procedure. We just need a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor to start this discussion, because I know we'll head down the path.
Okay, mover and a seconder. Councillor Saint-Amand, Councillor Cummings, all in favor? Okay.
Sorry, Your Worship, you don't need to call all in favor yet until you've had the full discussion. It's mover and the seconder.
No, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
Carry on, Sharon.
Thank you, Worship and Madam Clerk. So we proceeded with the reopening of the facility. We started with servicing the 4 major user groups, ICE user groups, and running town municipal recreation programs, with the goal of transitioning up to private rentals. But unfortunately, the pandemic, as it progressed, they implemented the color coding system, and we went from yellow to orange to red and never quite got there, and went to the lockdown status. So we have the potential to run some programming, do some ICE rental once the province releases what color we will be in the next couple days. But we don't anticipate that there will be a lot of ICE usage, even if we are allowed to reopen. So when we had closed, we were in red status, which meant that no scrimmage or gameplay was allowed with sports. And as such, minor hockey had canceled the last week of their ice rentals because they essentially had to reinvent their programming and how they were doing it. They've confirmed that if we are allowed to open, they will not rent any further ice, which impacts about 35 hours a week. Figure skating, the skating club, was currently renting 5. They would continue to do so. The Kings would rent some practice ice, but again, they couldn't engage in gameplay or scrimmage. And North Simcoe girls hockey would rent 2 hours. So we are recommending, and that was with our last connection with the ICE user groups. But once the province finally releases where we are, we don't know for certain that they would proceed with that total of 9 hours. We anticipate, so we've turned all of the ice plant down to operate a minimum standard. Much of our staff has been redeployed elsewhere. And we're recommending that we take the ice out to help us prepare, get ahead of the park season for one, because we know that we've had increased usage in all of our outdoor spaces with the pandemic. There will be some savings to the utilities, obviously, with shutting down the ice plant, not huge in nature, but those are the big drivers for our recommendation to close the ice.
Thank you, Sherry. Any questions through to our director? Okay, there being none, then we already had the mover and the seconder, so the motion would be that all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. Well, opposed, we have 1. Thanks. Moving on then to moving on to B, the Huronia Airport 2019 Strategic Plan Development Plan, next steps CAO 2021-03 that reports CAO 2021-03 be received by council for information, and that council endorses the recommended next step strategy as outlined within the report CAO 2021-03 as it relates to the Huronia Airport Strategic Development Plan report. A mover and a seconder. Councillor LaRose and Councillor Mayat. Now we will have questions or answers or debate or concerns. And before we do that, maybe I'll have the CAO fill us in on this and bring us through this report. So Mr. CAO, if you would, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report in front of council is a joint report authored by the CAOs of the three municipalities that own the airport, Midland, Tiny, and Penetanguishene. It's a joint report that really follows up to the information session that the three municipalities hosted that was open to the public on Monday, January 25th. Ultimately, the recommendation and the follow-up report and the information within is really kind of a follow-up to that presentation and very much aligns with the notion that a task force perhaps was something that we were going to come back to our councils with. So certainly for those that attended that information session, it shouldn't be a surprise. The report outlines kind of a next step strategy now that we've got the final report from LUMEX with respect to the strategic development plan of the airport. It outlines essentially two phases in terms of moving forward. Phase one being the development of a roadmap, which would outline all the recommendations in the final report from LUMEX, identify the priority and the timing, and essentially next steps with the recommendations. Phase two is essentially operationalizing and implementing those the roadmap, which ultimately contains all the recommendations. And the recommendation in this report suggests that perhaps a task force might be a way to go in terms of a cross-functional task force of community members, members of council, senior staff, and of course the airport. So the recommendation really is threefold. It really, as I said, it touches on engaging the key community partners and having them at the table. It touches on trying to keep the airport commission kind of at arm's length with some of the recommendations that are noted in the final report. And then lastly, we wanted to provide our councils which ultimately is the ownership group with what we felt was kind of the best path forward. With that said, I'll just note that we have included a draft terms of reference for a potential task force, and we've also appended a third document to the agenda, which is a letter that we received from the Airport Commission on Monday, this past Monday, that touches on their perspective of kind of the go forward plan. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments from members of council.
Okay, members of council, do we have questions, concerns, comments? Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the CAO was just talking us through all the next steps in the roadmap and everything from the LUMEX report, if council hasn't got a chance to read the letter yet from the commission, in their report, they're looking at using up some staff time from the three municipalities, adding a bunch of people. With that in mind, the commission is kind of talked in general of what we could do, and we think that we are probably better suited to take on that challenge. So we'd like to change the recommendation. I talked to the CAO and the clerk earlier today, and we have a small amendment that I would like to propose. And what it is basically is doing everything that the CAO just talked about, but having the commission itself best lay out what the roadmap is, where we can go, We have the expertise, we have the people there to do it. It would save us a whole bunch of time and save the ownership groups a whole lot of money. So if the clerk can remember, because I can't seem to find where it is, I would like to, at the appropriate time, make the one amendment for the motion to just change who does the work of the task force or the commission.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rose. I believe we will go into questions and more debate before you make that motion. But now I might ask the question of members of council. When you mentioned the letter that came from the commission, I did receive it. Did any other members of council not receive it?
Your worship, if I might, it's actually included on the electronic agenda with with it being republished yesterday by the clerk.
Hmm.
So it is on our electronic agenda for members of council to access.
Right. Okay, and then with that, then request to speak, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I did read the letter that came from the commission with interest and certainly understand a little bit of where they're coming. They are on the front lines for sure, but I still support the task force. I think this whole exercise has been put together so that we can get good information in reference to the sustainability of the airport for the future. And I do think that some of the ideas that have been brought forward about getting involved with our economic development people and that sort of thing would be a great advantage. So although, as I said, I did read the letter and I do sympathize somewhat with some of the comments that were made, I still think that a task force is the way to go at the moment. And I do think that the task force there should be a time limit. This situation has been ongoing now for some months. So if the task force does go ahead, I would hope that within about a 6-month span, they can come back with their findings. So that's my comments. And as I said, I do support the motion that's before us now. Thank you.
Any further comments, concerns, or questions from members of council? The Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through to the Deputy Mayor, in no way are we skirting what they're doing. We're saying that by the time it would take us 6 or 7 months to get staff up to speed on what they want to do, we're going to do the exact same things that the task force says, like under the same rules that are in the report. We would be able to report back to council probably within 6 or 7 months with a layout and a roadmap of taking care of all of the recommendations from the LUMEX report that we did. We just think that we are better prepared to do it. It'll be a lot easier to do it, but there's no change of the rules.
Okay, thank you again, Councillor Rose. Are there any further questions, concerns, or comments from members of council? Okay, now there being none, Councillor Rose, you wanted to put forward an amendment to the...
Just to the final recommendation, yes.
Yeah, and do we have that, what that is?
Yes, the clerk has prepared a motion.
So yes, Your Worship, Councillor LaRose came to me earlier today and asked me for my advice. My suggestion was to add a third piece to this motion that states, and finally, that council approves the amendment of the recommended next steps, that the Huronia Airport Task Force composition consists of the Huronia Airport Commission members.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for your motion? Councillor Mayat, okay. So we will vote on Councillor Rose's motion, and we have a mover and a seconder. So all those in favor of Councillor LaRose's motion? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I guess it will carry. Okay, thank you. And that will move us on to C, Dedicated Gas Tax Funds for Public Transportation Agreement 2021 Allocation, RDS 2021-05. That council enter into a letter of agreement with Her Majesty the Queen in Right of Ontario, as represented by the Minister of Transportation, for the provision of gas tax funding for the town of Penetanguishene transit system, and that council hereby authorizes this bylaw to be valid for all future agreements with regard to the dedicated gas tax funding set forth, and finding that a bylaw for the contribution agreement be brought forward by staff for council approval. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Vadeboncoeur and Councillor Klug. Okay, questions, concerns, comments? There being none, all in favor? And that is carried, thank you. Well, now we will move on to, got to get this one in my phone now. We move on to item D, which is policing costs at Central North Correctional Center, the CAO 2021-04, that council receives report CAO 2021-04 regarding policing costs at the Central North Correctional Center, and that council supports the efforts outlined in this report to engage and lobby the provincial government with respect to fair financial treatment pertaining to the Central North Correctional Center. With that, I would probably ask our CAO to give us a bit of a rundown on this.
Thank you, Your Worship.
I'm over in the second first. Councillor Saint-Amand and Councillor Maya. Okay, now, okay. Mr. CAO.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. And certainly, I hope that members of council have had a chance to read the report. It does kind of outline, you know, the situation background and the situation impact, as well as kind of what the next steps are that we're proposing. I will kind of run council through a bit of a summary of the report. For 15 years, the ministry has been funding the town of Penetanguishene for the policing costs at the Central North Correctional Center. For the first 5 years in operation, it was privately operated, as members of council are aware. So that makes up the 20 or so years that building has been in the town of Penetanguishene. There's been a long-standing agreement for those 15 plus years for those policing costs to be essentially reimbursed at that facility by the province. In 2015, when there was a major overhaul of the OPP billing model, the town of Penetanguishene, through political leadership, lobbied to maintain separate reporting for the town's policing costs, which essentially broke out the CNCC costs for policing at that facility. And quite frankly, it was, I believe, a good move. It provided a fair treatment of breaking out those costs at that facility and having them reimbursed by the province. 2 years ago, when our policing contract was up with the OPP and it came time for renewal, members of council will recall that we were in front of council with a recommendation from Police Services Board to extend the contract for 6 years. I believe it was 6 years. At that time, we had an opportunity to revert our billing reporting back to the normal system that all other municipalities utilize that are in a similar position to us with correctional facilities, which essentially would not break out the correctional facility policing costs. At the time, we wouldn't have had a way to recognize what those CNCC costs were, and essentially wouldn't have had an opportunity to cost recover those funds because we wouldn't have known what the extent of which the calls for service expenses were. So we stayed status quo. Members of council probably will recall that. ultimately, if we had reverted to the other model, our costs, we believe, would have increased as well, that we would have saw an increase in our costs. Little did we know that the province was in progress, perhaps is the way to put it, of ending their funding model with what they called the police liaison officers. And so at this particular point in time, it would appear as though we are in a position where our 2020 and our 2021 policing costs for that facility are not being recovered by the province. And so it would appear as though they've chosen to stop funding the policing costs, given what they have indicated as a move that the province made to pull all those contracts for those similar type programs. Most recently, what we've done is we've requested a revised 2021 billing estimate from the OPP so that we can try to decipher what the cost implications will be under the other billing, I don't want to say billing model, but under the other billing structure, which essentially is what all other municipalities are under. We have an inkling that certainly there will be an increase to the cost of policing in general for the municipality, in part because we don't have a mechanism to recover the CNCC costs, but also in part because what will happen is they will take our annual calls for service for the last 4 years, included in what they utilize as a 4-year average, and then that component of our billing model, which is calls for service driven, will actually increase based on an additional somewhere between 700 and 800 calls for service at that facility a year. We've also requested calls for service for that particular facility from the OPP for 2016 through to 2020 and to try to break it out by calls type. By getting this data, we expect that we should have a pretty good handle on essentially what that increase will be to the municipality, assuming we are not successful with lobbying the government to recoup or to continue recovering our policing costs. It's a complex matter, and so I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, and I understand members of council may have questions. The other thing I will say is that we have already reached out to Minister Dunlop's office, Jill Dunlop's office, our local MPP, to have a meeting, request a meeting with her. We did hear back actually today, so we anticipate that a meeting will be set up in the coming week or two, so that we can get in front of her with the ultimate goal of getting in front of the Minister of Solicitor General, Sylvia Jones, which is really where this issue needs to be, which is in front of the Minister of the Solicitor General. I want to be clear that it's not an OPP matter. The OPP simply bill us based on the funding model that the province has in place. And really the only involvement with the OPP is assuming the province, in fact, will not continue to fund us moving forward the way we've been funded. It would be in our best interest to request being reverted to the other model, so that we're not getting billed inclusive of the CNCC costs broken out on an FTE basis, which in turn we can't recover because the province presumably will say no. And so that would be the extent of the OPP's involvement, would be asking them to change our billing program, if you want to call it, which certainly we could and should do, depending on the outcome of the discussions with the ministry. The other thing I would say is our focus is really going to be on attempting to recover the 2020 and 2021 costs, which you'll see in the report, I think are just shy of $870,000, which, as members of council know, is pretty substantial for the town of Penetanguishene. We've had some difficulty with some communication with the provincial staff in the ministry's office. And so at this point, the recommendation and the strategy outlined in the report is to engage our MPP, which she's been very responsive, as I said, and ultimately request a meeting with the Minister of Solicitor General. There is a secondary issue here which is the heads and beds funding model, which we do touch on in the report. It's certainly something that we do want to address. As everyone, as council knows, it's in our strategic plan, and certainly would be our intent to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, and that we take every opportunity we can to lobby the government on that component. But it suffice to say that, you know, the recommended strategy is to first and foremost try and deal with 2020 and 2021 outstanding costs that the ministry has ultimately decided to not continue paying as of January 1st, 2020. So I've scratched the surface on the second issue, as I said. Certainly we won't lose sight of it. We intend to deal with that, but we want to really deal with 2020 and 2021 outstanding invoices first and foremost, and then talk about 2022 forward and what that looks like in terms of provincial funding for this particular matter. Whether it be going to the extent of the heads and beds model, and or the commitment that they made 20 years ago when this facility came to town, and their commitment, as I understand it, from members of council, was that they would fund the policing costs for this particular facility. In short, in kind of summary, I will say that we receive about $60,000 a year in what they would call PIL, or payment in lieu, from the ministry for this facility. It's based on the heads and beds model. As I said, it's $75 per head/bed, and there's roughly 800 beds in that facility, at least last year. And so that makes up the 60 grand that we ultimately receive from the province, 10 of which goes to the County of Simcoe, and we keep $50,000. If you do some quick math, inevitably our policing costs are substantially higher than that at that particular facility. And so part of the position that we will raise with the government is what we receive in property taxes, or PIL, versus the policing costs at that facility. And that's just one component of the services bucket, as we all know, that go into the property taxation model. So I think, Your Worship, I've tried to kind of touch on the key points. I appreciate there may be questions, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments at this point.
Okay, members of council, do we have questions to the CAO? I see Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two things. One, I wonder if we should hook up with any of the other municipalities that have provincial institutions in their municipality to make sure that we're all lobbying together to help them out, places like Peterborough and London and all of those. The second part is we have to get after the province. As most of us that were there at the time, this was an absolute guarantee from the provincial government that they would pay for all policing costs for that facility. For them to pull off this partway through the game and never want to pay taxes is a bunch of crud. There's absolutely no way that the residents of the town of Penetanguishene should be paying one nickel towards any of that. And there are ways and means that we can make this happen, whether they like it or not. It all depends on how much oomph we want to put into it. If you can recall the last few times we had some problems with them, they were solved in a very unorthodox manner, but they were solved. And, this is absolute crud on their part. No way should we be kowtowing to this at all.
Okay, Councillor Rose, I have to be one that would certainly agree with you. Mr. CIO, what kind of comments do we have here?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll touch on the first piece, first question first, and then I'll jump to a second piece. So with respect to lobbying with other municipalities, certainly at a staff level, we've had that conversation. We also had the conversation actually this afternoon with our FCS chair and co-chair. And while we agree wholeheartedly with that approach, we think that first and foremost, what we really should focus on is trying to get our 2020 and 2021 outstanding invoices covered, and get that issue addressed first and foremost, and then piggyback ourselves with other municipalities on the larger issue, which could really be twofold. A, the funding of correctional facility policing costs could be one branch of it, and the second branch of it could certainly be the heads and beds model, which really extends beyond just the 8 municipalities in the province that have correctional facilities. It also extends through to hospitals and other type institutions that are funded on the heads and beds model. So certainly more buying power, if you want to call it that, in the second branch of that. The first branch of it, and I'm going to speculate a little bit, but the first branch of it, I anticipate, when you look at the list of the other correctional facilities, the Sault Ste. Marie's, the Lindsays, the Miltons, the Bramptons, the Brockvilles, the Thunder Bays, the Miltons, they're pretty big municipalities. And I suspect, and I'm speculating a little bit, that the financial impact to those facilities based on calls for service comparatively and based on their general taxation levy versus the town of Penetanguishene, quite frankly, probably is not quite the impact that we're going to see in Penetanguishene. Not to suggest that we shouldn't jump on together and play in the same sandbox, because I certainly think we should. But my recommendation, based on what you're saying in the report, is let's first attempt to try to get the 2020 and 2021 issue resolved before we pick the bigger fight, if you want to call it that. And then, Councillor Rose's second comment, I couldn't agree more with respect to getting after the ministry. Our goal here is not to accept no for an answer. And certainly I've tried to paint a picture, because we felt that council needed to be in the know, as soon as possible. And try to get council on board with the kind of the lobbying strategy. So I couldn't agree more that we certainly can't take no for an answer.
Any further questions to the CAO? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I certainly agree with Councillor LaRose. The promise was made by the government of the day that they would pay policing costs. That was front and center when we negotiated with them. It's just really disheartening to see that they're wanting to withdraw. And another point, I think we should really, we need to be careful with the other organizations, because I'm not so sure that they're being compensated. I think we're kind of an anomaly, and maybe that's why the government is wanting to stop the contract. But I agree with you, Councillor Rose. We need to make a lot of fuss about this, if that's what it comes to. There's no way that the residents of our community should have to pay $800,000. We just can't afford that. And that was one of the things, Dan, I think way back when, that we negotiated very hard about them picking up those costs, because we knew right from the beginning that there's no way our small community could afford that. So I'm all in favor of doing whatever we need to do to get their attention and solve this issue. Thank you.
To Madam Deputy Mayor and Dan and a few other members of council, that the commitment by the province to bear the cost of OPP costing at CNCC. Distinctly remember, I was the one who sat in with Minister Tabucci at the time, and he is the one that gave the commitment that definitely the province would be responsible for policing. And I had asked for it in writing, which I believe we got, but can't find the letter that we received. But I do recall distinctly going into the room with him to discuss this, and he guaranteed that the province would pay the cost. So, Councillor Cummings, I saw you had your card up.
Thank you, Your Worship. There were 3 ministers that took over in that short amount of time when we were making the agreements. Mr. Runciman was the one that actually publicly made the statement.
Yeah.
And he said that we would get our beds for heads, the 75 for the total amount of occupancy in the building, which was, I believe, 1,200. So whether they had them in there or not, we were supposed to be guaranteed that beds for heads, $75. As for the, I agree with our CAO that we should be getting the, getting on top of this 2019, 2020 or 21 costs, try and recoup those costs back. But I do believe what Councillor Rose has said, we need to look at the other facilities, Central East, Kawartha Lakes Police Department is taking, or pardon me, Lindsay is taking that. The federal facilities, the CAO mentioned a couple of them, see what they're doing, just to see how they're being compensated, if they're being compensated at all. Because I remember we sat down, Councillor Rose and I actually sat down and said, they're not paying us enough to even supply the water to the building. So yeah, so they're taking advantage of us for sure. And this municipality, as small as it is, cannot handle that additional cost.
Again, you're bringing up points, actually all of the members of council, but maybe members of council, I know you were there at the time again when we were going through the process of negotiations to have the CNCC, the jail here. And you remember the meeting that we had at the Brian Orser Hall, which was full of the constituents. And I had asked the minister at the time, I just don't recall his name. I had asked him the question if we would get full taxes because it was a private company that operated it for the first 5 years. And then we would get full taxation. He said yes. And a month later, he was no longer the minister.
That was Minister Rob Sampson. He got up and lied to us, and that was the end of his career.
That's right, it was.
I asked him the question if we would receive taxation in lieu of, and he said absolutely. And a month later, he was not the minister. So.
Remember
okay,
that one too?
Further question, Councilor Mayat, did you have a comment or a concern or question? No? Okay, Councillor Badebonker.
Thank you, Worship. I was another one that was around at that time as well, and I won't repeat everything that's been said by the other members of council that were there wearing their council hats. And you're absolutely right. That was my recollection as well. I'm very surprised that there's no correspondence that confirms that. I was very upset to read the report and to read that the province had reneged on their commitment. There was absolutely no way that the municipality would agree to taking on a provincial facility with the costs that would go with that provincial facility without an assurance that the policing costs were going to be looked after by the province. You know, there were a lot of economic interest in terms of going after that facility, in terms of the jobs and everything else. But the key thing was always to be balanced by being able to afford the facility in our community. And the policing costs right from day one were identified as a major issue. So I think that going to our MPP is a good first start, and hopefully that will convince the province that they should step up. I don't know what the negotiations were with respect to the other facilities. The CAO mentioned Central East and Milton. They were certainly, you know, right after us in terms of expansions and whatnot. I just recall the circumstances in Penetanguishene, and they may be somewhat unique. I'm just disappointed that the province, from a policy perspective, just with one brush has said, well, we're just going to do away with any kind of agreements that we may have entered into with municipalities with respect to the provision of policing costs. So I support the what's outlined in the report, and And if there's anything I can do to assist from what I can recall back in the day, I'm certainly willing to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderbalk. CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple things that come to mind. So we will certainly quadruple check, I'm going to say, because I think we've already triple checked our documents, but we will certainly quadruple check to make sure that indeed there is nothing on file in terms of records to the point that a couple members of council have made. The other thing I will say is my understanding is that when they made this change and essentially part of what we believe drove the change. Again, we don't really know because we weren't notified. I believe the other municipalities were formally notified, and I think the difference being some of the other municipalities had formal contracts in place, and I think in our case, perhaps there was no formal contract in place. I think the other point that I'll just note is I believe. When they made this decision, essentially to pull the officers out of the facilities, which I believe they called the police liaison program, they of course notified the municipalities and ultimately, subsequently thereafter, effective January 2020, is when they stopped flowing the funding. So I do believe the other municipalities and we were sent an article from Halton region, I guess that would be the Milton facility, that raised a little bit of noise a couple years ago. But again, I'm speculating a little bit based on kind of what I've heard from other people, that I think the impact to some of these other municipalities are smaller. And so, I just raised that as a point for council. And I think that the impact to the town of Penetanguishene is certainly material, it's consequential, it's significant, and certainly, doesn't suggest that we should be changing our strategy or being, less direct with the province, but certainly, wanted to just make that point.
Well, if we have any further comments or concerns, I think the motion is straightforward that the CAO and myself engage with our MPP and see if we can get something going there, and also try and get a commitment to have a meeting with the Solicitor General, Sylvia Jones. So we already had a mover and a seconder, so all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. So moving on to presentations and consideration of reports, Committee of the Whole. So the Committee of the Whole report, January 13, 2021, that the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole report related to the Recreation and Community Services section be approved. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Cummings and Deputy Mayor Dubo. Are there any questions or concerns? None. All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to that the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole report related to the Planning and Development Services section be approved. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Levy and Councillor Wedebalker. Any questions or concerns? Madam Clerk, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Your Worship. I tried to catch you before you started down the path. As mentioned by Councillor Gadabancourt, the planning noticed a date error in one of the motions that was passed in the Planning and Community Development Services section in our January 13th meeting, and that item was item 8B I. And that was regarding the, I believe, phase 4. I'm going to pull up the exact title of that, but there was an error in the date. And so we just wanted to, so it was item result of meeting for applications for the draft plan of subdivision, file number Pen sub 2020-01 and zoning bylaw amendment, file number ZA1/2020, phase 4 Harbor Point subdivision PL 2021-01. So that item, there was an error just in the date of the I think they were after the date stated September 30th, or sorry, the date stated January 23rd, 2020, and the date should have stated September 30th, 2020. And so we just want to ensure that correction is made in the minutes by pulling that item for correction.
That's fine. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I don't think that's a problem or an issue. Do we need anything motion-wise?
Yes, I think just for the records, we should have a mover and a seconder to make that amendment. I'll make sure to minute it appropriately.
Okay. Mover and Councillor Vladimir and Councillor Levy. All in favor of that? That is good. Thank you.
And then we should still get the mover and seconder to approve the rest of the items for the planning and development section, please.
Mover and seconder. Councillor Levy and Councillor Vladimir. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So that now brings us back to recommendations contained with Committee of the Whole report related to Planning and Development Services section be approved, and that was moved by Councillor Levy and Councillor Vladimir. Are there any questions, concerns? There being none, all in favor? Thank you. That the recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report related to the Transportation Environmental Service section be approved, moved by Councillor Clue and seconded by Councillor LaRose. Questions or concerns? All in favor? That is carried. That the recommendations within Committee of the Whole report related to the Finance and Corporate Services section be approved, moved Councillor Saint-Amand and Councillor Mayotte. Any questions, concerns? Anybody want to pull anything? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Brings us on to presentation and consideration of report of special committees. There are none. Motions of which notice has been previously given. There are none. And that brings us to notices of motion of which there are none. So then brings us down to consideration of bylaws. And in the bylaws, we have that bylaws 2021-07 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with the corporation of the County of Simcoe for the use of municipally owned premises at 10 Robert Street West, Old Fire Hall Bays. 2021-08 being a bylaw to authorize entering into an encroachment agreement with Leonard Allen, 107 Main Street. 2021-09 being a bylaw to authorize the procurement of natural gas through local authority services, LAS. 2021-10 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the dedicated gas tax funds between the town of Penetanguishene and Her Majesty the Queen in right of the province of Ontario, hereby represented by Ministry of Transportation. 2021-11 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2000-02 as amended of the Corporation of the Town of Penetanguishene and remove the H symbol from 255 Champlain Road. 2021-12 being a bylaw to amend a zoning bylaw 2000-02 as amended of the Corporation of the Town of Penetanguishene, Harbor Point Subdivision, Phase 4. And that bylaws be read a first time and deemed to be read a second and third time and carried. Mover and a second. Councillor Vladimir and Councillor LaRose, all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. That brings us to question period from media and public. Are there any questions from the media or the public? If there are some, I know that Maureen, you're there. Do you have any questions, Maureen? No, I don't see it. No, she's good. Thank you. So brings us to announcements and inquiries. I have one announcement that was quite nice to hear and see or get or whatever, that I received actually by messenger from Eileen Steele. Eileen Steele is, as you know, the minister of our Anglican churches here in Penetanguishene. And she sent me a little note here. It says, "Thank you to your workers for clearing the snow. I was out early this morning and the man was there doing the stairs. Very pleasant man, a real joy to talk with. He represents the town office very well. Kudos to all the town workers. So with that, does anyone else have any announcements to make? Yeah. Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one announcement. As you know, Winterama, or 73rd Winterama, is already underway. For some events, it's changed a little bit this year. It's going to be virtual. However, I encourage people to log into Connect Penetanguishene or winterama.ca. There are still a number of events that you can register for. We still have the trivia event, the cardboard toboggans. There's a competition there. Dylan Locke will be singing, all different types of events that are still going on. Some have finished now, but some are still available. So I encourage people to log into Connect Penetanguishene and find out what's going on.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Great. And further announcements, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to remind the residents of our community about 211, the telephone system that is available. It has a listing of information for everything imaginable. It's a helpline. It's available to the public 24/7, and it connects people with home support services, mental health services, just everything that you can think of. So just wanted to encourage the community, if you have an issue and you wonder who to call to say that you're digging up your lawn for whatever reason and you don't know who to call 211. They'll give you the phone number, and just encourage people to use 211. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Councillor Cummings, again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I forgot one thing. Winterama buttons. For those of you who are still collecting Winterama buttons, if you were to log into Connect Penetanguishene and see what Marla has in store for those buttons, you can pick up some there. Thank you.
And for all members of council, if you haven't gotten around to reading your email yet today, that you all have a button in your mailboxes, and so you can get them there as well. With that, any more announcements or inquiries? There being none, we will move on to our confirmation bylaw. And the confirmation bylaw 2020-13, that confirmation bylaw 2021-13 be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk, mover and a seconder. Councillor Sinema and Councillor Cummings, all in favor? And move to adjourn. Councillor Cummings, and we are adjourned. With that, council, we will move into our committee of the whole meeting, and we'll call meeting to order with the approval of the agenda. Committee of the whole agenda, February 10th, 2021. Recommended action that the committee of the whole agenda for February 10th, 2021 be approved as presented. Mover and a seconder. Councillor LaRose, Councillor Levy. All in favor? That is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest, if anyone so has, declare. If not, at the appropriate moment. Presentations and delegations, all sections, we have none. Council information package. The council information package of January 22, 21 and February 10, 2021. Recommended action that the council information package, having been given due consideration, be received for information. A mover and a seconder. Do I have a deputy mayor, seconder? Councillor Sinema, all in favor? We would like to get the motion passed, and then I will go to anyone wanting to question concerns or interests. So, Councillor LaRose, I see you have a request to just. So,
Yes, Your Worship, it was regarding the February 10th, the first item. That's what I wanted to just have a comment about.
The first item, and is it just the dated February 10th, or is that is there a?
Well, it's the item concerning the trailhead at Overhead Bridge Road.
Okay, so that we can pull. And then does anyone else have any? Councillor Vadivonker?
Thank you, Worship. On the same council information package of February 10th, the correspondence from the resident 2A Burns Crescent. I'd like to speak to that.
Okay, so we'll pull both of those, and if I can have, I have a motion to approve the balance of the SIP. Councillor LaRose and Councillor Vadivonker, so all in favor? That's carried. Now we go, Councillor LaRose, your concern.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's more of a concern. I know we can't change anything at this time. I just wanted to express my extreme unhappiness. I am completely beside myself how such a small little project that we have been working on from this council for 2 years couldn't get done. And then as I read in the report, it's going to be because of COVID. Councillor Sandoval would recall, we dealt with this at section 2 years ago. Council dealt with it shortly after that. We were still in council chambers at the time. This is a one-day fix. I know where we're at, and I understand we can't change it. So, you know, there's nothing we're going to do now except staff's going to carry on and try their workaround. I'm just saying, I'm very displeased that this got left out in the cold for 2 years.
Councillor Rose, I'm not too sure that it's all of that. I think maybe, Mr. CEO, can you give us some clarification on this?
Thank you, Your Worship. What I was going to suggest is perhaps we can ask our Director of Planning and Community Development in combination with our Director of Recreation and Community Services to provide some clarity. There's really two issues at hand here. The issue that Councillor Rose is speaking to has actually been rectified and solved. That was part of the larger issue that extended kind of at the back portion of that property. This issue that you're seeing on this memo is actually an issue that just came to light in late 2019 from our lawyer after the first issue got resolved. So it really is two separate issues. Perhaps I can ask Andrea to provide some clarity for council, and perhaps if Sherry needs to jump in, I think it would be helpful, Your Worship, if you don't mind.
Very good. Andrea, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship, and to Councillor LaRose and members of council. I think Jeff's tried to be clear and sort of summarizing it, but Councillor LaRose, just for our benefit, so there has been an ongoing issue that was resolved regarding ownership of the road allowance and encroachments happening and property standards happening, and title issues with respect to lands still in the name of Township of Tiny. So I think that's the matter that you're referring to that's been ongoing and been delayed for years, for over 2 years. I can say that that issue was resolved. As Jeff noted, this further issue about the ownership of title around the parking lot parcel specifically was new in 2019 and hasn't been able to progress further through the court system. Unfortunately, it's much longer than just a day-long process. It's actually quite a process to make and create the new title or transfer the title of this property to the town. It's not quite something as simple as a day. It does take some time. So that's the reason of the delay. And it was something that came up quite later than the first issue dealing with the ownership of the road and the property surrounding 776 Overhead Bridge Road and the trail.
Carrie, do you have any comments?
No, I have nothing further, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Well, we take it into consideration, Councilor Rose, and hopefully we can move this thing on. And as you pointed out, unfortunately, with the courts, it's getting that title, and the difficulty with the courts not being functional. So, anyone else? Yeah, Councilor Walker, you had pulled one.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, it was a letter from a property owner on Burns Crescent who raises a number of issues pertaining to his property and his neighbor's property, and in particular, some of the things that his neighbor has been doing. I'd like to ask that this matter be referred to staff under the Planning and Community Services section for a report on the various matters that have not been resolved that are listed in his letter. I understand that there may be some things that pertain to the Public Works Department, but if Planning and Community Services through bylaw could take the lead on this, that would be great. I think this gentleman has raised a number of points. There's been recent information that's been provided to the town since this letter was submitted. I think that needs to be considered as well. And again, I'll just speak to it, Your Worship, when we get to the referrals, and ask for council support to add it to the referrals list at that time. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. CAO, do you have any comment in regards to this issue?
Through Your Worship, no, I don't have any comments. Certainly, staff would be happy to bring a resolve to this and kind of in full circle. There's been various conversations with this particular resident, on numerous occasions with respect to these items, and staff would be happy to provide counsel with the municipal staff position on all these particular items.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will move on to 6 sections, and A is transportation and environmental services, and pass it on to Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Your Worship. So first tonight on our consent agenda, we have recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. We have 3 items this evening. First one is Midland Penetanguishene Transit Ridership Quarterly Update, Q4 2020, Report RDS 2021-04. The second item is a memo to council regarding the award of the Payette Secondary Water Supply, MCEA. This is a correction. The report is 2021-01. And the third being proposed 5-year sidewalk preventative maintenance plan, report RDS 2021-06. Do we have a mover for this item to get it on the floor? Councillor LaRose, seconder. Councillor Sainama. Is there any discussion or any questions to these matters? Seeing none. All in favor? Thank you so much. That has been carried. Moving to matters for consideration tonight. The first item being procurement exemption for electronic bidding. This is an extension request. The report ENG 2021-01. The recommended action is that the exemption clause identified as Section 8, subsection 8.2 in Bylaw 2018-12, being a bylaw to establish a procurement policy for the corporation of the town of Penetanguishene, be approved to allow for electronic submissions for all procurement opportunities, including requests for proposals and requests for tenders. And that electronic submission, more clearly defined in Section 5.11 of Bylaw 2018-12, be exempt to allow for electronic submissions for all procurement opportunities until December 31st, 2021. And further, that electronic submissions will only be permitted in accordance with Bylaw 2018-12 by utilizing a previously approved electronic bidding website. I believe it was fairly clear in the report. Are there any questions about this item? Seeing none. Do we have a mover? Councillor Vadeboker, seconder, Councillor LaRose, all in favor? That has been carried, thank you. The next item is Southgate Subdivision Phase 1. This is the final acceptance and assumption of municipal services, report ENG 2021-02. The recommended action is that the final acceptance and assumption of the municipal services associated with the Southgate Subdivision Phase 1 be approved. Again, fairly straightforward in the report. Are there any questions about this item? I know our Director of Public Works is online if there are any. No, seeing none. Do we have a mover? Councillor LaRose, seconder, Deputy Mayor Dubo, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And the next one is Harbor Point Subdivision Phase 3. This is the initial acceptance of granular road preparation base course asphalt first stage curbs. Report ENG 2021-03. The recommended action is that the initial acceptance of the following underground municipal services within Phase 3 of the Harbor Point subdivision be approved. Remaining water distribution system, including all appurtenances on Thompson Road, sanitary sewer system, including all appurtenances on Houston Street, and storm sewer system, including all appurtenances on Houston Street. Granular road preparation Gran A and B on Thompson Road, Houston Street, and Bosley Drive were previously initially accepted. Base asphalt on Houston Street and Thompson Road. As the report indicates, this is the initial acceptance. Securities will be returned. However, there are about $800,000. I'm guessing on the amount because I can't think of the actual figure, but $800,000 plus remaining in securities. Are there any questions for our Director of Public Works tonight on this item? Seeing none, everyone's very quiet. Is there a mover? Councillor Levy, seconder, Councillor Cummings, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. On to referrals to upcoming agenda and staff. The referral motion is that the Transportation Environmental Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. We have on the referrals list, Church Street parking, which is coming Q1 2021. I believe our Director of Public Works is expecting that to come forward in March, and accessible transit options for Q2. Are there any changes, any additions or removal? Seeing none, no discussion. Do we have a mover? Keep this as is. Councillor LaRose, and a seconder, Councillor Cummings. All in favor? Thank you so much. Question period from media and public. Seeing none, I will turn it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Clue. And with that, we'll move on to 7, Section B, which is Recreation and Community Services. And I will pass it to Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under our consent agenda items, that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. We have 4 tonight: the Penetanguishene Public Library monthly minutes, the Museum and Heritage Advisory Committee minutes, the Community Wellbeing minutes, and a free fee waiver request for 2020. Do I have a motion to get this on the floor? Or any? Deputy Mayor Dubo, and second by Councillor Rose. Are there any questions or concerns regarding these items? No, then I call for the vote. All those in favor? Thank you, passed. Matters for consideration, we have 1 tonight, and that is the town sign location. The recommended action is that the town proceed with option 4 for the town sign, and that the location of the new sign be established prior to the relocation site of the Angels on County Road 93 entering Penetanguishene. Do I have a motion to put it on the floor? Councillor Rose, seconded Councillor Sanama. Before I open it up for discussion, I just want to let you know that we discussed this at section, and we have come to the sort of agreement that Deputy Mayor and myself would like to see that the Angels be put into place before any actions are done on this sign. We already have a sign that's present that's not falling down yet. So we were suggesting that maybe we get the angels in place first, and then we can decide where our sign would go. So that's from what we are saying. So it's recommended from us is to take number 5 versus number 4. Any other discussion? No one wants to discuss it?
So perhaps Councillor Cummings, you could ask for the call of the vote on option 5.
Okay, well, that would be an amendment, or pardon me, it would be an option 5. I'll refer back to the clerk. We have to, that would be an amendment, correct?
Yeah, so you have a mover and a seconder for the motion that's on the floor.
Right.
No one's provided comments as yet. You suggested that perhaps you want to amend that to option 5.
Yep.
So technically you should really continue the discussion, vote for option 4, and then if it's defeated, suggest amending the motion to option 5.
Okay, we can do that. Are there any further discussion on this particular item using option 4? Councillor Vanavancourt.
Councillor Cummings, no, it wasn't to do with option 4. It was more to deal with option 5.
Okay. Then if there's no other discussion, we'll vote on option 4. All those in favor of option 4? Okay, I see 1. Okay, motion defeated. Against, I should say against, just to make it legal.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the motion is defeated. Now we'll make option 5. So that the town proceed with option 5 for the town sign, which is do nothing at this point. We'll wait for the angels to get in. Further discussion, Councillor Vanavancourt.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. So the option 5, as it's in our report, is do nothing. And I'm not sure of the timing of all of this, but it would appear that the current sign could use some paint. And I'm just wondering for what it might cost to use some primer and some paint, that in the interim we could at least do that until such time as all the other pieces fall into place, and then we can move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just for an update, I'm going to refer to our director to give us an update on the engineering of the angels. Sherry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the engineering proponent of this project was supposed to be done last year, but obviously the COVID delay, so it got started at the very tail end. So they're working to put the engineering designs together based on the concepts that were approved by council. As soon as we can get those concepts or the engineering finalized or close to finalized, we should also get an updated probable costing for the project, because what we have budgeted is the best estimation, but until the actual engineering is done, we won't know that costing. So with respect to the condition of the sign itself, we can certainly continue to get it touched up and regular maintenance done until the engineering designs are finalized and before council can see the project complete.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you have a comment?
Thank you. No, our director did qualify to say what that I wanted to understand about the engineering. Sherry, do you have any time limits on that? Will that come before us, perhaps before summer?
It's my hope before summer, Deputy Mayor, long before summer, but I don't have that confirmed timeline as of yet, so I don't want to misguide council.
Very good. Thank you very much. I certainly agree with sitting back and waiting till we get that design. I know the council has approved the number 2, I think, in the designs that were brought forward sometime last year. That's been settled, but we still should realize and know exactly where they're going to go. So it will all blend. Now with the trail that's there, it might impede a little bit, and we may have to put the sign further up on that side. So I'm just all in favor of waiting till we get a full design. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or concerns about this option 5? Then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of option 5?
Did you get
See one?
Sorry, sorry, Mr. Chair, just for clarity, I know option 5 is just option 5. I just want to ensure I have you as the mover for option 5. I don't have a seconder.
Oh, okay.
And I'd really like to clarify for the public what option 5 means. I know you all know what it means. I just want to add clarity. So I have Councillor Cummings as moving option 5, being that staff will proceed with the relocation of the Angels portion of the project only. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Thank you. And then I just need a seconder for your.
Okay,
vote.
so I need a seconder for that. Then Deputy Mayor Dubo, all in favor? Thank you, carried. Let's get back here. So our next is the referrals to the agenda for upcoming. The Recreation Community Services section endorsed the following additional and existing referrals to the upcoming agendas and staff. So we have 2, the outsourcing of day camp and the municipal alcohol policy. Are there any additions or anybody want to pull anything? If not, I need a mover. It'd be Councillor Mayette, a second. Councillor Sanama, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Question period from the media. I don't see any. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. And with that, we will move on to number 8, which is section C, Planning and Community Development Services. And I will pass it on to Councillor Levy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with the consent agenda. Recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. We've got the Municipal Law Enforcement Activity Monthly Report, January 2021. Memo to Council Business Recovery Task Force, meeting number 7 and 8. And the memo to Council Queen's Court Appeals Update, 221 Fox Street. Do I have a mover and a seconder for these? Moved by Councillor Saint-Amant, seconded by Councillor Cummings. Is there any discussion on any of these or any questions? Seeing none, call for the vote. All in favor? And carried. Thank you. Matters for consideration: site plan SPA 012020 120 Guildwood Park Drive, PL 2021-10. Recommended action that site plan approval be granted for the property at 120 Guildwood Park Drive, application SPA 01-2020 for the development of 2 single detached dwellings. Do I have a mover for this? Councillor Badavoncourt, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dubo. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Consent agreement, 1075 LaFontaine Road, PL 2021-11. Recommended action that a bylaw be passed to authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the consent agreement for execution regarding the lands municipally known as 1075 LaFontaine Road. Do I have a mover? Councillor Vadaboncourt, seconded by Councillor Rose. Any questions on this one or concerns? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Very good. And we're moving on to referrals to upcoming agenda staff. We have 2, vacant municipal property inventory update and the graffiti policy and the MLEO policy and procedure review. And I might just add that I've seen some advertising of our surplus properties. So I don't know, Andrea, should we take that off or leave it?
Thank you very much, Councillor Levy. So this was a matter that I believe we've addressed previously at the January meeting. It was a matter that Councillor LaRose, I think, has added to the referral. So perhaps I'll defer to him if there's anything outstanding from that referral item that he wants us to address in the future. We can follow up.
Thank you very much. Good suggestion. Councillor LaRose, should we leave it for a bit or pull?
I don't remember why, but I thought we had done away with it last council meing.
Okay, so it's gone, right?
Near as I can remember.
Okay, we can remove that. Do I have a mover? Oh, sorry, Councillor Vadaboncourt, go ahead.
I'm not familiar with the procedure, so I'm not sure if we're just voting on removing that particular item or we're dealing with all of the referrals.
Gee, good question. I don't think we have to vote to remove that, do we, Stacy? I need some guidance here, please.
No problem. Yeah, no, that item is completed. It's fine. We can remove it.
Sorry, Stacy.
Oh, sorry, can't hear me.
Stay still, okay. Please.
Okay, I won't turn my head. The purpose of the referrals is to get permission of all of council in terms of how to spend staff time. So the removal when it's complete is perfectly fine. We can remove that. And then getting the mover and seconder is more about adding an item and ensuring that all of council agrees that staff time should be spent on. That's why it's separate.
Okay, so I'm done, right?
Unless a council member wants to add an item, they would request that now, and if nobody has anything to add, then you would get your mover and seconder, and we would be done. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I see a few questions. Councillor Vadaboncourt.
Thank you, Chair Levy. Just to remind committee about my request to refer the letter from the owner of 12 Burns Crescent to the staff to review the points that have been raised in the letter and bring back a report outlining how these points can be addressed. I spoke earlier on this matter. Just at the tail end of my comments, I saw Councillor Cummings put his card up. I don't know if he had anything to add on this particular matter, but certainly from my perspective, I would appreciate if council would support putting this matter on the referral list. Thank you.
Under planning? Yes, of course.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. I certainly agree with that. Councillor Cummings, did you have something to add?
My point was exactly the same as Councillor Vadaboncourt's. I'm looking at some zoning and building code as well for that particular property that the neighbor is talking about, because that's a subdivided property owned by the same owner.
Okay, so I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder to add that item. Councillor Cummings and Councillor Vadaboncourt. Thank you very much. All in favor of adding the Burns Crescent issue to the consent?
Chair,
yes.
I thought I saw Councillor Mayott's card up, but I'm not 100% sure.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Mayotte.
Okay, did you want to finish this Burns Crescent's first, or I see her clerk has her hand up there, so I'll let her go first and then I'll go.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Okay, sorry, assuming Councillor Mayatte's request is regarding something different. We do have a mover and seconder to add this Burns Crescent item, but we do need the key deliverables, please. What exactly I heard Councillor Cummings say something about zoning. So just want to ensure staff understand exactly what it is. I'm sure because of that letter, there might be a lot of details there, but I think just for full clarity, what staff are expected to provide would be ideal. Councillor Vadabancourt, I don't know if it's your item, if you want to provide that.
Very good idea, Stacey.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in the letter, there's a list of various infractions, concerns with respect to behaviors of the neighbor that involve not only planning, but bylaw, as Councillor Cummings has said, potential building code issues, and recently the OPP have become involved. So it's just an update on all of these and where as a municipality we can address the concerns that have been raised in this letter.
Thank you very much. You can work with that, can you, Stacey? Very good. Now, where we're, Councillor Mayat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know, this is where to add it, but here's another issue that's been ongoing, I don't know how many years, and it has to do with 235 Church Street. And that was an item that was brought up many years ago. And I don't know where we stand with the bylaw. They've talked to this gentleman, and every time I go by that street, there is more and more and more items being put on that property, and people are complaining. And I know we had looked into it. That's all we heard of. And this is quite a few years ago. And this is another issue that's been going on for years. Could we put that on the agenda for referral to let the at least council know what's going on? Are we acting on this, or is this just dead in the water? I'd like to put that on the agenda, please.
I couldn't agree more, Councillor Mayat. If I were the next door neighbor, I would, yeah. It would
There's
be
actually
most
some
upsetting.
next door neighbor that sold and moved out.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Clue, does your comment pertain to that issue?
Just this issue, we have had an update in the last 6 months. I'm not sure if perhaps Councillor Mayat was absent at that meeting, but it did come to our council. I remember getting an update, and I know it's ongoing with bylaw.
Well, this has been ongoing with bylaw for years and years.
Years.
And years. And I know people that sold their property because of that. And we may have had an update 6 months ago. I might have been absent at that meeting. I don't know. But something's got to be done. It's got to be done quick. So that's why I want to put that on the referral or get something done, please.
Madam Clerk.
I don't know if I have to put a motion on the floor or.
Hold on.
Yeah. Yes, again, so just for clarity, I may not have captured it, but Church Street was referenced. I need a specific name for the item and key deliverables so that council has a full sense of what they're voting on in terms of adding a referral item for staff.
Okay, sorry, I apologize. 235 Church Street, the person that lives there is basically a hoarder. There's hoarders in the backyard, in the front yard, all over the place. And I'm sorry, but it looks like a junkyard.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I think this might be sort of in camera as privacy issue.
I was just going to question that. Madam Clerk, we need a little direction here. It's not our usual style to identify particular potential.
Yeah, certainly. I think this is an important reminder in terms of referral items and in terms of specific addresses, people, staff, can only provide so much, which members of council know. I don't know. I'd look to the director of planning in terms of this bylaw, this longstanding bylaw issue, maybe an update about the last update and how to move forward. It sounds like it is something that has been brought forward that Mr. CAO can maybe give some guidance as well.
Thank you. Director Betty?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Councillor Levy. So this is something that we can add to it. I mean, I appreciate the confidentiality aspects of this, but if there's a specific follow-up around property standards matters and that process, I think that's general enough that we can follow up with through a referral to a public committee report, if that's helpful. I'm not sure if Jeff wanted to add. I think otherwise I would defer to our clerk around how much we can report on publicly and what should be in camera.
Mr. CAO, do you have any comments here? Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only comment I'll make is just piggybacking off what our clerk and our director said. There definitely are some intricacies from a open session versus in camera. I think we understand what the ask is, and certainly we will at a staff and at administrative level discuss what the best course of action is. I do concur. I do believe there has been an update provided in the recent months, but we certainly can provide, or we certainly can discuss at a staff level what the best course of action is, so that we're not breaching privacy and we're not reporting in open session or having debate and dialogue in open session that shouldn't in fact be had in open session.
Thank you very much. So Councillor Mayette and the others, are you comfortable leaving this in staff's hand and having our CAO accountable for this?
I've got no problems with that at all. I'm still getting complaints, and
I know, but we're not going to discuss it in this form
not a
at
problem
this
as well.
time.
Leave it in their hands.
Okay, Jeff, it's yours now. Okay, I'm lost. Do I have anything else to do here?
Nope.
Stacy, am I done?
So you have, looks like Councillor Rose may have something to add, but so far you have added the Burns Crescent item to the referral item list. And so just a general motion to approve the rest of the items, unless Councillor Rose perhaps has an addition.
Well, we'll see what he throws at us. Go ahead, Councillor Rose.
No, I just wanted to make sure that the item was going to be added as an actual item.
The bylaw infraction or potential infraction?
Correct.
No, because of the confidentiality issues, we're going to leave that with staff. Okay, go ahead.
If we're going to leave that with staff, then when we get to the finance and general government section, we're going to have to ask staff for a policy on what council should do to bring items like this forward. There is other items that we were going to talk about, but they're of a similar situation. We need to know how you want us to bring them up. Right now, we don't have a rule to say what we want to say. It's kind of goofy.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll leave that with staff and have further discussion, perhaps in an in-camera format, and get the advice you're looking for. Good enough? Okay. Where am I now? Oh, Stacey, have we voted on the Burns Crescent edition?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have voted on that, and we'll just do a quick mover and seconder and vote for the remaining items, and you're done.
Okay, thank you. May I have a mover? Councillor Vadamancourt, seconded by Councillor Saint-Amant. All in favor? Okay, it's carried. Questions from the media or the public? I don't think there will be, but however, and I will pass that back to you, Mayor LaRue.
Thank you, Councillor Levy. And with that, we will move on to Section 9D, Finance and Corporate Services. And I will pass it on to Councillor Saint-Amant.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Under Section 9A, the consent agenda, there is nothing there. So we can just move on to Section B, the matters for consideration. In regards to the concrete wharf structural repairs internal loan, Finance 2021-202. The recommended action is that a loan from the HEC Reserve Fund for the town's net funding required for the concrete wharf structural repairs project be approved in the amount of $255,000, and that the loan terms are set as follows: 1.86% per annum, a 15-year amortization, repayable in blended monthly payments of principal and interest of $19,638 to begin January 1st, 2021. And further, that the annual repayment be included in the 2022 and 2035 wharf rate and tax supported budget. And finally, that the clerk be directed to bring forward the necessary bylaw for council approval. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Mayotte. And the seconder. Sorry, Councillor Clue. Any discussion? Thank you. All those in favor? Okay, sorry. Thank you. And that is passed. Just to let you know, I only have a screen with 4 people, so that's why I have to flip around to make sure I can see everyone. Okay, so 9B, Section 2. The development charge interest policy, finance for FIN-2021-03. Recommended action that staff report in 2021-03 development charge interest policy be received for information, and that the development charge interest policy that includes an annual interest rate of 5% plus a $1,000 plus HST administration fee included as attachment number 1 be adopted by council. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Mayotte, Councillor Cummings, any discussion? Report, okay, and no questions, so I'll call for the vote, please. All those in favor? Thank you so much, so moved, or so passed. In our referrals to the upcoming agenda, the referrals that are on there right now is the Huronia Airport Commission. Referrals at the Finance and Corporate Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. We've had the report with the Huronia Airport Commission. Councillor LaRose, this was brought forward by you. Do we keep it on, take it off?
I would suggest that it has run its course. It's done. It's been brought back by the 3 CAOs, so I believe it can come off now.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Any additions to the referrals list at this point?
Madam Chair, I see that the CAO has his hand up.
Thank you. I'm getting there. Sorry. Thank you. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, what I might suggest, I concur with Councillor Rose that perhaps taking this item off would be ideal. But what we might wish to do so that we don't lose sight of it is add a referral item with respect to the roadmap and the implementation for the commission to come back within 6 months with that roadmap so that it is on council's radar, and as the ownership group, the expectation would be that come back through the councils. So just a suggestion in terms of an addition there.
That sounds like a wonderful idea. So if we could have a mover to, like this, we don't need a mover to remove it, but we do need a mover to have it added on. Councillor Levy. And a seconder, Councillor Mayotte. And so it will be the Huronia Airport Commission. The key deliverables will be as indicated by the CAO as far as the roadmap and a further update. I will keep Councillor LaRose as the council member if that's okay, because he is on the commission. And so expected date in 6 months, so we'd be looking at Q3 2021. Is that reasonable? So if I could have a mover and a seconder. Mover, yes, Councillor Mayotte. Seconder, Councillor Cummings. All those in favor? And that is carried. Questions from the media and public? I don't see any. Nothing in the chat. Oh, wait a sec. Bear with me. Good. Okay. No, we're good. And back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sanema. And with that, members of council, staff, thank you very much for a very good meeting again this evening. And I wish you all the rest of the evening and a happy and good, safe weekend. We are adjourned.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank
Night,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Participate in Winterama.
Good night.